new life into the internal combustion engine. And when I sit in Houston and I do sporting events, I go to my favorite team, the Astros games. It's fascinating to see the oil and gas companies marketing the fact that they bring baseball to life. And we're talking now about all the things that petroleum products actually make. You know, the polyester in the uniforms, the binding in the baseballs. It's like the industry is having a moment and they're definitely seizing it. So that's offsetting EV. But I think when you look globally, it will still continue to be a large part of the mix.
Regina, how's Mr. Bregman doing for the Astros this year?
Are you trying to put a dagger into my heart, Tom? He's doing really well for the Boston Red Sox.
Oh, he is. And I think he had 2 home runs and 5 hits the other night. Thank you, Regina, for Alex Bregman. Thank you, Regina Mayer. In Houston with KPMG, and we said good morning always to 92.9 FM in Boston. The Dow, my eyes are killing me.
We're down 190 points. Yeah.
There's a deterioration.
Yeah.
Sort of like what we're expecting May will be for the Detroit Tigers. With our news in New York City, Michael Brown.
Still poking that stick. Thank you very much. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland is heading this morning to visit El Salvador after one of his constituents was deported. Immigration officials admitted Kilmar Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported last month, but is still detained in prison in El Salvador. Senator Van Hollen talked about the motivation for his visit.
This is about the rule of law. This is about due process. This is about not letting people be just whisked off the street, which the Trump administration admits was done in error. And I just want people to think about what that means.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration says Abrego Garcia is part of the MS-13 gang, which the family denies. And President Trump says he's looking into the legality of shipping U.S. citizens to Central American prisons. White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt.
He would only consider this, if legal, for Americans who are the most violent, egregious, repeat offenders of crime, who nobody in this room wants living in their communities.
Spokesperson Caroline Levitt. California Governor Gavin Newsom says the state will sue over President Trump's tariffs. Meanwhile, the president said that he will attend a meeting today with Japan to negotiate tariffs, American military support, and trade fairness. President Trump is ratcheting up his feud with Harvard University, and the university isn't backing down, saying it will fight the administration over its tax status as well as challenge it over the decision to freeze federal funding. Trump said they should lose all of their federal funding, not just the $2.2 billion that he has frozen so far. Tilly Robinson is the managing editor of the Harvard Crimson.
Harvard is clearly bracing to weather this kind of storm, and whether that means taking legal action, whether that means diverting funds from elsewhere in the university to support the continuation of this research. I think we just don't know what's going to happen next.
Those demands from the Trump administration include that Harvard report foreign students who have committed conduct violations to federal authorities and end all DEI programs. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom Paulise.
If I shut down Ronnie's Suburban 3 nights in a row at 2 a.m. at RIT, is that a conduct violation?
That's a good college experience.
That's a good college try, is what that is.
We have like Duran Funkero, like nobody. Paul Sweeney, cratered. Netflix is down all of 8% in this debacle.
Yep.
I mean, they're killing it on a relative basis.
They are. I mean, it's just
killing it.
You know, they just came out yesterday with some guidance, long-term guidance for them, significantly increase, or their goals to significantly increase their revenue and profitability. So it's rare in a time here where there's so much uncertainty that they would come out and make such a big call about their future. But it's driven by the fact that everybody's streaming. You're streaming.
We're running out of time here, but we got to come back to this. Like in my house, streaming is 95% Netflix.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fact. I don't know. The market deteriorates negative 220 now on the Dow Jones Industrial Average from New York City. Bloomberg surveillance.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are doing a live stream on Rumble, on YouTube, my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and simulcasting on X Spaces. If you would like to ask a question or tell me your opinion about what's going on in the news, especially the financial markets, please ask for the mic and you can talk live on the show. This is an interactive show, so please join. Thank you for everyone watching and listening through X Spaces. I greatly appreciate it. If you have a question, just ask for the mic, or you can just give me, your take on what's going on in the news. But we are doing this live stream on April 16th. The market has opened up, so let's do a market update of what's going on in the United States. But before we do that, the Asian session, because the Nvidia news that came out about chips, that I think it's the H20 chip can't be sold in China from Nvidia, that added pressure to the Asian trading session. All right, so the Nikkei was having problems. You also notice the strengthening of the Japanese yen. I'll tell you why that's very important. So let's take a look at what's going on with the U.S. markets right now. So for the ones that don't know, I'm live streaming video on Rumble, YouTube, and on my website. For the YouTube stream and on my website, you can see the actual real-time market moves as we're covering the news. All right. So the S&P 500 is now trading at 5,320. It's really important to reiterate the two very important support levels based on fib sequence analysis is 5,150 and 4,810. All right, so we're above that first support level right now. If that breaks, expect that the S&P 500 to go down and test the 4,810 level. Now, barring bad news from from the tariff war, all right, assuming that there's no additional really bad news, I think that we saw the bottom on that heavy trading day on Monday of last week, where we tested that 4,810 level. I think we already saw the bottom. All right. Now that doesn't mean it's going to be a straight upward movement for the S&P 500. I think it's going to be bouncing around a little bit before we start seeing an all-time high. But I do believe by the end of the year that we most likely, assuming there's no war in the Pacific, all right, and we don't, drop a nuclear bomb on Iran, I suspect the S&P 500 will be at an all-time high by the end of the year. So it behooves people to actually start slowly accumulating shares. But like I said, don't accumulate individual stocks, start accumulating broad indexes. I prefer, something like the S&P 500 broad ETF, like SPY, all right? But there are lots of others that you can purchase, but take a look at this from a macro economic point of view and not micro. If you purchase individual stocks, you can get burned because of idiosyncratic risk. Now, I gave you the warning. It's up to you on what you want to do. Now, the VIX is still elevated. I would feel more comfortable if the VIX was below 20, but it's not. And it's going to stay elevated for a little while. Right now, we're at 31.53. So there's still stress in the system. Now, that's an important indicator. Now, I'll explain how that correlates to the USD Japanese yen. Now, the Japanese yen is trading relative to the dollar at 142.46. If the Japanese yen breaks 140, it goes below 140, that is a signal in the international markets, especially the currency markets, that there's stress in the system globally. The BOJ, the Bank of Japan, announced yesterday that they are looking at these price moves with the currency and they may intervene. All right. And like I've been saying for weeks now, that the Japanese yen is a key stress indicator. If the Japanese yen strengthens, you have stress in the economic system, especially in Asia, and it's going to lead to further sell-off in the equity market. All right. And we also, there was news today that came out where the Bank of Canada kept interest rates steady. All right. So just pay attention to what the other central banks are doing around the world and pay attention very closely. Does the Japanese yen go below 140? If it does, I think that we're going to see a VIX that elevates and that we'll see additional sell-off and potentially test the 4,810 support level that we saw with that heavy sell-off based on the tariff news that took place. All right, so was it 2 weeks ago? I guess it was. But the point here is pay attention to the Japanese yen. It's a major indicator of stress in the system. All right, and the BOJ has already telegraphed that they're looking at it very closely and they may intervene. Okay, now the Euro USD is at 1.43. Now we were seeing some trade moves in anywhere for the last month or so, anywhere from like 106 or 109 to 114. So right now there is a weakening of the dollar relative to the euro. All right. The oil market for WTI is trading at $62.30. All right. There's probably going to be a range in anywhere from around 65 to about 59. All right. There's going to be a trading range there. Now, it's important with oil to realize that in the United States, you get below 60 and some of the less efficient oil wells are going to need to be pulled offline because it's not profitable. It really becomes stressed if you get to the 55 or the 50 level. All right, so just keep that in mind, that cheap oil has a negative feedback loop that shuts down supply. All right, so that in the United States is that threshold is around 50 to 55. All right, you have some inefficient wells where you start seeing stress below 60, but the real pressure point is 55 to 50. All right, is a range. So just keep that in mind. Now with Brent usually trades, that's oil market overseas. Brent crude usually trades higher than WTI. All right. Now the Saudis are a big player in Brent crude, and they have to fund their government. To fund their government without a deficit, it's approximately $80 a barrel for Brent crude. And we're not there. I mean, Brent crude's probably trading at around, I'd have to look at it, but Brent crude's probably trading about 64, 65, way below the 80. So there's additional pressure point in crude that could cause a negative feedback loop because of the Saudi financing of the government. All right, so just keep this in mind. It's not just about supply. It's not just about demand. It's also about sovereign debt. That's important to keep in mind here. All right, now the BITO ETF, which is longing Bitcoin. It's an ETF on Bitcoin. That's trading at 18.24. That's been stressed for a while. And like I said, the USD Japanese yen is trading at 142.36. Watch for it breaking 140. All right, so you hear a lot of people in the news saying, oh, the dollar is crashing and the treasury market is crashing and the equity market's crashing and everything's trading, negatively. I want you to pay attention really closely here. And I said this yesterday. Do not bet against the United States. Do not. I'm not saying this just because I'm from the United States. I'm not saying that at all. Do not bet against the United States, because if you pay attention to what I have to say, you will make money, but you just got to take some pain. All right. Slowly accumulate more shares and don't even think about it in the equity market broad index. Now, if you want to take a little bit more risk, buy small cap, but broad index, Russell 2000, SPY, a leveraged ETF if you want to do that, but long broad index. Stay away from individual stocks. The next thing you need to pay attention to is that, like I said, there are major support levels at 4,810. Now, if it breaks, you'll have a major support level at 4,500 for the S&P 500. Now, people are saying the dollar's weakening. Yeah, but they don't tell you the other side of the story. The dollar has been in record highs in the last 10 years, the last 4 years of that 10 years. You know why? We were coming out of the crisis of 2020, and the Federal Reserve had a policy where when we had inflation, they were doing a tightening. So when they were tightening, all right, during that inflationary bout that we had, when you're tightening, you're strengthening the currency. Not just that, because the United States was coming back online after the crisis of 2020. Demand, especially travel and vacationing and all that, started to perk up and more spending was taking place. So there was a lot of money that was flowing into the United States. All right. So the dollar because of just the stress of the crisis of 2020, a lot of funds flowed in that boosted up the dollar. All right. Dollar for the last 4 years has been elevated above 100 on the dollar index. They don't tell you this. There's a lot of people, even Mike Adams is totally wrong on how to read the market. Mike Adams is wrong on the way he's reading the market. I'm right on this. All right. You just got to pay attention. I manage professionally large portfolios. All right, you just got to pay attention. The dollar, if you take a look at a 10-year price chart, the dollar in the last 4 years has been elevated above average. That means it has to naturally come back down below 100. Now that average is around 97, around. And it fluctuates, depends on where you do your moving window of data. But the point here is that the dollar has been above 100 for a long time. And a big part of that is because of the aftershock from the 2020 crisis. Now it's coming back down naturally. Now, people are only looking at, well, what happened 2 weeks ago? No, you got to look at what happened in the last 10 years or 15 years. Another case in point, take a look at what's been going on with the treasury market. You hear in the news, oh, someone's selling off treasuries. First of all, the treasury market is a very complex market, much more complex than equity market. Equity market's like playing checkers. The bond market is like playing chess, all right? You have individuals buying into the bond market that want yield. So you have some buyers that are looking for high yield and lock in for duration. You have others that are just looking for price action, all right? And they need the bond prices to go up. Well, if people want to buy treasuries, usually prices go up and yields go down, all right? Those are the price action individuals. And usually bond yields go down, right? Because you have price action going up. Well, if price action is going up, that means most people are getting out, institutional investors are getting out of equities and moving into treasuries. So it's inversely correlated, all right? Now, if people want to take risk, then they buy equities, and normally the bonds start selling off, and the bond yields go up. But there is a sweet spot where institutional investors that are looking for a certain yield curve profile for their portfolio, where they want to lock in duration and get that 5% or 4.5% and lock it in. They need that as part of their portfolio. So sometimes high interest is actually beneficial for certain types of investors. Other times it's price action. It depends on the type of bond investor. That nuance isn't conveyed on X. That nuance isn't conveyed even on Bloomberg because they want to scare you. Now look at a time series of 10 years. Now what you will see is that yields, the bond yields, 10-year and 30-year, but especially the front end of the curve, have been moving up ever since 2020 crisis. All right? So you had a historical low. That's really an echo from Lehman. And now you are normalizing, getting out of zero bound and slowly moving back to 5%. And they want in the news to just focus on the first 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks, the contemporary, just the last 2 weeks. Oh, the bond yields are, they're going up and oh, there's a sell-off. But yet if you look at a 4-year trend, actually yields are going back to a normal range as the monetary policy is getting out of zero bound because of the aftershock from Lehman that took literally almost 20 years to get out of. You got to pay attention to the historical context. So these people that are saying there's a sell-off of dollars, there's a sell-off of treasuries, there's a sell-off of equities, every single one of them are wrong. Now, you can have in a high volatile situation, which doesn't happen that often. If you take a look at a 20-year time series of the VIX index, you'll have about 3 or 4 of these incidences where you were above 50. And each one of those, you had a breakdown of correlation. So if you normally have a treasury yield, all right, let me phrase it this way. You normally have a negative correlation between equities and treasuries, all right? If equities are going up, the price of the bond goes down and vice versa. That's normal, liquid, non-dislocated markets. But when you have a VIX index that's hitting 50, 60, 80, you have these periods of time for about 24 to 48 hours, there's a dislocation in the market. Now remember, 24 to 48 hours, there's a dislocation where everything sells. Because the money managers and the algorithms don't know what to do, and they just close the positions. They're worried about, stop losses, or they're worried about call margins or whatever. All right. But these periods of dislocation are only 24 to 48 hours. It happened during Lehman. It happened during the .com crash. It happened during, I believe it happened actually during 9/11. I'd have to double check that. It happened during the 2020 crash. So, but you don't have that many of these. They're very rare when you look at a longer time series of VIX index. All right. But when they do happen, equities sell, treasuries sell, and a lot of times the dollar will sell off. All right. Depending on what the incident is, if it's overseas incident or generated in the United States. But dislocation happens, especially at VIX indexes that are at the 50, 60, 80 level. But it doesn't last. And the VIX starts to go back down and then starts to normalize at about a 30 level. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's at 31. And then markets go back to their normal correlations or negative correlations, or, positive correlations or negative correlations, depending on the asset that you're looking at. All right. But the realization that these correlations they're not static, they're dynamic. All right. Sometimes bond, in a perfect world, bond correlation price relative to equities should be negatively 1 correlated, but it's not. Sometimes it's 0.6 negative. Sometimes it's minus 0.9. Sometimes it's minus, 0.5. Sometimes it's 0.2 positive. See, it just depends. And it's a dynamic situation. You try to dynamically hedge a portfolio, like I have, all right? You'll notice really quick that correlations are a dynamic variable, not a static variable. And so when everyone is saying dollar is selling off and the equity is selling off and the bonds are selling off, they are not realizing there was a temporary dislocation of the market. That always mean reverts back. So just pay attention. Don't bet against the United States. I am not wrong on this. All right. If you want to make money, just pay attention and you will be fine. Just like with your health. If you pay attention to what I'm telling you about your health, you're going to be okay. While everyone else is like, oh, yeah, I'm so worried about turbo cancer and I'm so worried about prion disease and I'm so worried. Just follow my lead and don't worry. All right. Oh, I'm so worried that the sky's falling and then, I'm not going to be able to retire, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry. Follow my lead. It's that simple. It's that simple. So I just gave you a reason why all of these people, they're saying that, America is about to fall and that, move your money overseas, why that will hurt you in the long run. All right. So just pay attention. There was a dislocation on that sell-off day on Monday, 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And all these days kind of just blend together now. But that big sell-off day, I think there's a high there's about over 60% chance, 60+% chance that we saw the bottom on that on that sell-off day. Now, it's possible that we retest. It's possible. Anything's possible with Trump. But don't bet against America, because you will always fail on that. Now, J.P. Morgan warned people, back in the day, in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, he warned people, do not bet against America. You will lose. And some people, you had Bloomberg investors saying, oh, move your money to Europe. Well, if things get really bad with this tariff and it really clamps down on the world economy, do you think that the United States is going to do better compared to Europe or to Asia? So why would you move your money over there? See what I mean? Don't bet against America. You will lose. And you're going to wish you didn't do that. All right? Okay. So what's going to happen? The dollar is, yes, the dollar is declining in the index, but that's a good thing. One, it allows for us to be able to produce goods and sell them to other nations. But not just that, the last 4 years, the dollar has been elevated compared to a 10-year or 15-year historical average. It needs to go back down to about 97. It's trading at around 99 point something. All right. It's been above 100 for 4 years. So you don't want that. All right. It's coming back down naturally. Now, at treasuries, yields are going back to their normal level because the Federal Reserve is getting out of zero bound from Lehman that took almost 20 years to get out of. But everyone has goldfish memory. So treasuries will go up. All right. Now, they have been stabilized, and now, like, for example, let me tell you what the treasury market is. Let me look it up here. So the 30-year is trading at 4.7. Okay. And everyone was freaked out a week ago. And, on the 11th or so, it was trading at 4.9. Well, it's trading down now, all right? But it's basically going to be at that 4 point, that 30-year, you're looking at just below 5, maybe hit 5, all right? Now, when you're looking at the 10-year, the 10-year treasury in terms of yield, it's trading at 4.3. Okay, so 4.3, 4.7, we're in that 4 range, that 4 handle, and it spiked back around the 11th at 4.5, almost 4.6. So it's trading down. All right, so markets are not dislocated anymore. Going back to the point I was making, VIX at an elevated level, which is not that when it's at the 50, 60, 80 level, right? It's not that often. And so there is a small window of dislocation and it goes back to normal. And I just proved my point. All right. Markets are functioning, yet you have people that are saying that it's selling off. Well, they're not looking at the historical significance of what's really going on, the move, the normal trend, the trend of this. All right. Okay, so now, when the Federal Reserve starts to intervene in the market, assuming it does, but it will eventually, there's one part of it that's trying to get out of zero bound from Lehman, which is taking a long time. And the BOJ also warned the Federal Reserve that once you get to zero bound, it's really hard to get out of. All right. And hence the problem that Japan had. A big part of it, a big part of the problem. Okay, so now, when the Federal Reserve wants to intervene, let's say they want, let's say markets are deteriorating, they have to lower rates. Well, if they're lowering rates, then you're talking about a yield curve coming down again over time. Because most of their action is at the front of the curve, maybe at the 10-year. And then, but their transmission along that yield curve starts to the force of that transmission starts to dissipate. It's more in the front end of the curve. But that curve over time, when they lower rates, is going to start shifting that curve down. All right. But it's not going to go to zero bound, because zero bound was a Lehman event. So what we're going to see is we're going to see this shift. We're going to see this shift downward if they lower rates. If they stay steady, you're going to still, and most likely that's what they're going to be doing in 2025. You're going to see this stabilization of that yield curve at about the 4.5 to the 4.8 level, depending on if you're looking at the 10-year or the 30-year. All right. And the dollar is probably going to come down to and stabilize it around the 97 level, which is healthy. And there's going to be this, quote, wall of worry that builds up in the equity market, but it's going to be bolstered up with tax breaks, tax cuts that get passed in Congress. And when that happens, you're probably going to see at the end of the year a higher S&P 500 above 6,130. That's how I think this is going to play out. So don't worry, the sky's not falling, and anyone that's saying that it is, they don't know what they're talking about. Because all you got to do is just listen to what I just said and take a look at a 10-year price chart of the 10-year Treasury, the 30-year Treasury yield. Take a look at the dollar and take a look at the VIX 20-year. And you'll know that all you got to do is take a look at that, and that proves my thesis. So I just told you how to make money. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support my work by making sure that you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please make sure you subscribe to all those channels. All right. I need your help. You know, there's censorship on YouTube. I do live streams on YouTube. I do these live streams on Rumble. But unfortunately, you know, there's censorship on YouTube. Every time I post on YouTube, I lose subscribers. And it's not because the subscribers don't want to listen. It's because of the algorithm. All right. I'm not the only one this happens to, especially for the ones that said what we did say to try to save America in 2020. All right. Literally. So help support my work. Share the links, ask your social media to follow me, all right? And that way I can tell you how to navigate through these markets, how to make money, and also how to navigate through your health and wellness, all right? You listen to me, you will do fine. You don't listen to me, it's your own goddamn fault. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the great products that I have, such as the structural nano silver soaps. All right. I use these soaps daily. Okay. It's high quality. You can get it in charcoal tea tree or lemongrass, or made from structural nano silver, and also lavender and peppermint. Get a few bars for your household. Help support your health and wellness. Help support the work that I do. I just taught you how to make money and how to improve your health. Now, if you listen to these stacks that I tell you, that I do to slow down the aging process and boost up my immune system, perhaps you don't have to worry about all the things that are happening post 2020 crisis, right? People are worried about, you know, things like, you know, turbo this and, you know, brain disease that. Don't worry if you just pay it. Do you think I'm worried about it? And I know a lot about the subject matter, probably more than most. There's probably about only 3 people in the whole world that know more about the subject matter than I do. All right. So I'm in the top 4 for sure. All right. I'm not worried, but you got to listen. If you don't listen, then you may have problems. Now, I think people would say, well, you know, how do you fight some of these things? Well, if you improve the immune system and reduce inflammation, a lot of the problems that people are complaining about post 2020 don't happen. I wonder why. All right. With that said, please go to my store, get the soaps, get a few bars, use discount 5, you get $5 off. You spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Use discount 5, all caps, number 5, and you get $5 off. Now, I'm tired of talking, so let's go back to Bloomberg.
And precipitating the recession. And so this time I think we might have, say, second, third quarter, a mild negative GDP number because of the uncertainty. Companies just waiting to see what happens, 0.25%, something like that, negative GDP. But that would be about it, because unless the Fed is on a long-term aggressive tightening cycle, I just don't see how we get a recession. And clearly the Fed's message is they're sensitive to the economy, they're sensitive to the needs and liquidity needs, and companies' liquidity needs are in pretty good shape. So it's hard to see much of a, other than a tariff-induced little negative jostle in the marketplace.
So we've spoken to equities. What's your view? How are you thinking about other asset classes like the bond market, currencies? What are you thinking right now?
Well, I think that U.S. high-yield public bonds look pretty good for an investor who just can't take the volatility. Those yields are, between 6.5% to maybe 8%. And I think that the high-yield market actually is in very good fundamental shape, because those companies have pretty much spent the last 10 or 12 years rebuilding their balance sheet. So they really are not as sensitive to a drop-off in rates, and certainly not to if the Fed would raise rates, which doesn't really look like it's in the cards. So we think that's a very attractive sector. It's not as high as we've seen in other sectors, but defaults are only about 2%. So we think it's a pretty good sector for someone who wants a little bit more than, say, a money market rate.
Margie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Margie Patel, Senior Portfolio Manager at Allspring Global Investments up there in Boston, Massachusetts, joining us via Zoom. Coming up in just a couple of minutes here, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers speaks with Bloomberg Television's anchor David Weston. So we will bring you that conversation in just a moment here. Resetting the kind of where we are in the marketplace right here. A sell-off continues today. We have the S&P 500 off 60 points. That's 1.1%. The NASDAQ taking it a little bit harder, off 315 points at 1.9% decline here. Again, on back of some of the Nvidia and some of the other tech names, some of the chip names, our ASML.
Now, what's really
AMD,
important,
Nvidia,
I was watching, this is really important to pay attention to. I was watching the Asian session yesterday, and sometimes I do a live stream during the Asian session. I was just exhausted. I just didn't have time with the holiday and everything that's going on. But I was watching the Asian session, and there was definitely stress within the Asian markets, and you could see the appreciation of the yen. All right, and then the BOJ made their statement that they're looking at the markets and they may intervene. That's a signal before they intervene that, if it breaks 140, be prepared that the BOJ weakens the yen. Okay, now when they do that, there's a quick moneymaker, and that is to short the yen when the BOJ intervenes, and you can make some money. But you got to be very careful, and you got to be on the ball. You got to be watching, because you could lose a lot of money too at the same time. Because these candles of intervention from the BOJ get pretty big, all right, and then they come back down, and that intervention doesn't last for very long. But you can make money, but you can lose money too. So you got to be careful if you want to play that currency market. I'm not going to go beyond that because people can get hurt. But let's go to Summers that cover this Harvard thing, and then I'll continue on with the thought that I have, because all this is live, so I want to hear this from Summers.
Diversity, that's all right. But here's the thing. In America, you have to follow the law. And the approach the Trump administration is taking of simply announcing an across-the-board freeze is wildly extra legal in its approach. It is not at all consistent with the
First of all, there's something wrong with his teeth. He must have dentures, and there's something wrong with just the way he speaks. It's just, get it out, Summers. I know you're a smart guy. I've actually met him at conferences, economic conferences. The issue that I had with Summers was he was in the room with Clinton that set in motion Lehman because they were deregulating the banks. Lehman happened because of this motherfucker. He was one of the people, one of 4 people in a room that made a decision to reduce regulation for the banks that led to Lehman, which leads to a 20-year trek to slowly get out of zero bound. But he's going to tell us on how things are.
Part of what's being done to legal residents of our country. And if an institution like Harvard cannot resist tyranny when applied to it, with Harvard's $50 billion endowment, with all its network, with all its prestige, then who can? So Harvard should not go interjecting itself into politics. But God, when it is the object of an...
What happens when Harvard gets millions of dollars, tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars from a sovereign nation that doesn't have the United States' best interest? Like China, like some of these Middle Eastern countries. So don't say that Harvard's lily white. They're not. They're red.
Right to taxpayer money. Can't the government put conditions on that money?
So here's the thing. First of all, the money is not going, it's not like the government's funding the DEI office at Harvard. Not like the government is funding the student discipline mechanism at Harvard.
Whoa. Money's fungible. You are sending a grant, or you're paying for contractors for certain research or whatever. All right. And therefore, the money that is running the university could be allocated to other departments. And then Harvard's budget would be supporting the DEI. But if you take away the grants, then those budgets for those non-essential programs within Harvard would have to be canceled. So it's not that the grant paid for the DEI, but money's fungible. And by giving Harvard money for research and other things that the university supposedly needs, it frees up money for them to push these ultra-liberal agendas. But Larry Summers doesn't want to tell you that.
Notice, with no hearing, no judicial review, no transparent notification to Congress that is mandated by statute, to simply indiscriminately start cutting off previously promised and committed funds because it has a disagreement over an issue with the university.
So Larry, give us a sense of what, as a practical matter, this will mean if it continues through. You ran Harvard at one point. You know the budget. You know that $53 billion endowment there. What will it do to their operations?
They'll have to cut programs.
Look, they'll have to make some very important strategic choices. I hope that the university will find ways, even if there is a cutoff for some interval of funds, to maintain vitally important programs, to not cut back research. But potentially, if the U.S. government goes to war with our great universities, it means a sharp reduction in the kind of scientific progress that has caused the United States to be the envy of the world.
Like I said, and you can test this for yourself, go to any subject matter that's hard science, physics, chemistry, biology, biotech, whatever, all right? Medicine. And you pick a subject and you pick a question and you query that, in these libraries, all right, like PubMed or these other databases of scholarly journals, primary research scholarly journals, and look at the first 50 hits of that question that have been recently published in the last 5 years. And I'm guaranteeing you that majority of them are not from the Ivy League. You may get 1 out of 50, maybe 2 out of 50. A lot of them are coming from state schools. That's where most of the research is coming from. Now, there are over 300, around about 350 or so. I looked it up yesterday. I don't remember the exact number, maybe 347, maybe it was, of Carnegie research level institutes. They're classified as R1 or R2, all right? And there's an additional like 200 or 300 other major research institutes that are not classified under the R1 or R2 Carnegie classification. All right? And there are 4,000 universities. Now, there's only 8 Ivy League schools. You add in the Ivy League Plus, that's another 25. The far majority of the research institutes in the United States are not Ivy League or Ivy League Plus. And that's where most of the research is coming from. So it's a canard, what they're saying. Most of the research, basic research that's coming out, and cutting edge research, is not from Harvard. It's not. It's from state schools. That's a fact. If you don't believe me, just search it.
I think we have a problem. If the government is not prepared to fund scholarships that promote opportunity for our poorest students who are very able and generate social mobility, I think we have a problem. I think what we need, frankly, is
Why is Summers, and I don't give him enough benefit of the doubt, and I'd cut him off too much, but he's talked enough over the last 50 years. And he screwed up the economy with that deregulation under Clinton. But you know what? He is an economist and he's a consultant. And when you're a consultant for, let's say, a powerful multinational corporation or for a country, and you have ties to Harvard and the Harvard Corporation and the Harvard overseers, in government, because he was in government too. He was a Treasury Secretary. He knows a little. He wanted to be he was trying to vie for a seat at the Federal Reserve, but people didn't like his attitude, his personality. And so he didn't get into the Federal Reserve, but he really wanted it. But what's the point I'm making? He knows where his bread's buttered. And it ain't for America. Trust me on this.
Interference with the IRS, that it's a sacred duty of the Treasury Secretary to resist. It's exactly what was alleged to have happened 6 levels down, and many people got very upset in connection with the so-called Lois Lerner case involving 501c3 deductions in conservative groups. If there was punishment of conservative groups, people were absolutely right to have been hugely outraged about it during the Biden administration. I don't know anything about the merits of the case. But for the President of the United States to be calling for changing the tax status of his adversaries, this is new. And
but that university has been hiding. The university is a hedge fund with books. It's about the corporation. Harvard Corporation is what he's attacking. And Harvard Corporation has been along for a long time. It's almost as powerful as the government, all right? They've been hiding. And they've been pulling the strings for many things. The Vietnam era, the whole Vietnam War was orchestrated from the Asian region studies at Harvard, and they were tied with the CIA. Vietnam came out of Harvard.
The elevation of a person with no experience, no administrative or information technology experience, to be the temporary commissioner of the IRS, chosen on the basis of political loyalty to the Trump enterprise. I look at what are probably the extra lawful agreements entered into without even speaking to people at the IRS with respect to information sharing and immigration. I look at the president's involvement in specific cases, and I see the most important line that I thought I was supposed to defend when I was Treasury Secretary. Apolitical tax enforcement. Neutral, professional tax enforcement, not driven by politics. And I see that line being crossed with the Treasury Department cheering it on. And it makes me both very sad and very angry.
Larry, thank you so very much. Really appreciate this. Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, now with Harvard. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
Right now is our very own Bloomberg television anchor David Weston, sitting down with former Treasury Secretary and former president of Harvard University, Secretary Larry Summers, talking about kind of what we're seeing between Harvard and the Trump administration. All right now let's get a little bit of a reset here. We can do that. We'll go over to John Tucker to get a Bloomberg business
Oh, the major average is lower, but off the worst levels of the session. Tech leading the way lower. The chips are down. Advanced Micro Devices, they announced this morning around 9 o'clock Wall Street time they expect to take a charge of as much as $800 million after the Trump administration put new restrictions on semiconductor exports to China. This, of course, comes after Nvidia made a similar disclosure that it's going to take a write-down of $5.5 billion because its H20 chip will be banned from export to China unless it secures a license. Right now, the S&P 500 51 points lower, down 1.
I have a unique perspective on Harvard. All right. I have lots of different degrees. I went to Harvard. I got, a master's degree from there. I did my research on the TAT protein at Harvard. I know a lot, I know how it works over there. All right. And there's a problem with the institution. And that problem is that for hundreds of years, because the institution is like almost 400 years old, for hundreds of years, they have been major players in this country. But the problem is they're always on the wrong side of history at the very beginning. They were for the king. They weren't for the revolutionaries back in the revolution. They were for the king, all right? Until they were forced to be for the revolutionaries when they figured out that, it'd be better if you aligned with George Washington and not the King of England, all right? They weren't for civil rights originally. They were against civil rights. They were for slavery until they decided not to be for slavery. They weren't for labor unions. They were against labor unions. They had a phrase, protect your class, when they were trying to break these labor union protests that were going on, across the country back in, the 20s, right? Harvard has always been on the wrong side at the very beginning until they become on the right side. They were wrong on with this protesting with what was going on the campuses post October 7th. I don't really care what you think about, your persuasion of October 7th or not. I don't really care. I know what's written in text for thousands of years. And they don't care about your opinion either. All right? But the issue here is how Harvard has aligned themselves, and they have always been on the wrong side until they're pushed to be on the right side. They have not been they have not been pro-America, pro-United States. They're pro-corporation. And when the pressure is such that the corporation has to capitulate, then they decide to make a different tact, change their strategy. But all right, so just keep that in mind. That's what is going on in Harvard. Now, you got about 5, maybe 10% of the student body, and maybe even less for the faculty, that are conservative. And you got 90% that are liberal or ultra liberal. There's probably 30% that are ultra liberal. And the far majority are liberal. All right? But you do have a conservative group there. It's important. It's important. I fall into that group, the conservative group. All right? To save this country, we have to put pressure on the ones that have leadership and political power that are coming from Harvard into the political sphere. You have to put pressure on the university. You have to put pressure on these individuals, like the mayor of Boston, to change their policy. Now, the corporation, do you think they care about civil liberties and the Constitution and all that? They don't give a fuck about that. They care about their portfolio and their tax status. All right. If you hit them where it hurts, they will capitulate. All right. Now, when it comes to these people that are coming into the political sphere and creating policy that is anti-God, anti-family, and anti-country, and eroding our Constitution, eroding, what it is that makes a country, like its currency and its borders. When you have students coming out of these universities perpetuating this crap and eroding our Constitution, you need to push back. But you don't demonize the whole institution, because there is a 10% of the institution that is actually on the right side of history. All right.
Why that's really bad for us in our earnings, and if we don't see terrible tariff damage, we'll be okay. So everybody's kind of in the same position, so I'm not sure how much he can add at this point.
Hey, maybe he'll come out with some scenario analysis,
Maybe double.
Exactly. We'll see where that goes. All right, Michael McKee in Chicago. We appreciate that, Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy correspondent. He will be covering Fed Chairman Jay Powell's speech this afternoon in Chicago, and he'll have all the reporting coming out of there. And clearly, there's a scenario where, as Mike was just saying, maybe the best thing for the Fed is just to kind of wait and see.
Of course they're going to wait and see. Of course they're going to wait and see. I mean, Paul Sweeney, Paul Sweeney, Duke guy, all right? But, I'll tell you, he ex-bank, investment banker, but at times he's like as dumb as a box of rocks. Of course they're going to hold. You look at the economic data, Paul Sweeney, listen to DrPaulCottrell, all right? If inflation is above 2%, if it's, at 2.7 or 2.5, the Federal Reserve lowering rates, it's going to be inflationary. All right, Sweeney? If the unemployment rate stays below 5%, you have a hot economy. Lowering rates in a hot economy is inflationary. That's the reason why the Federal Reserve screwed up and we have this bout of inflation. The tariffs is minuscule in terms of inflation compared to the mistake that Janet Yellen did at the Treasury Department, stating that inflation was transitory and the Federal Reserve did not do shock therapy. And then they added fuel to the fire by cutting rates in 2024 when the inflation was too high and unemployment was too low. Of course they're going to hold. Because if they don't and they cut, which is what the Wall Street wants, because they want that hot money to flow into equities, and they don't care if they destroy stuff. Rich people will make more money in an inflationary situation. The middle class and the poor will lose. That's the battle that's going on. All right. So you have people like Sweeney that's like, well, maybe the Federal Reserve is going to hold. Maybe. You just have to look at the economic data that they are supposed to be looking at on a daily basis to make that determination. But they're like drug addicts, all right? Wall Street has to have that hot money, cheap money from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has to just keep on pumping out money so that Wall Street can keep on investing it into the stock market and just keep on, increasing it more and more until it blows up. And middle class America, the poor, suffer. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the citrus and the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. This is a dual-purpose product. It's a deodorant. It's for males and females, but it also helps to detoxify your body. It's made from essential ingredients from the Himalayas. Very high-quality ingredients. No aluminum, no baking soda, essential oils from the Himalayas. All natural. Get this for your household. Get a couple bars for your household. Get the citrus or the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. It's for males and females. It's a dual-purpose product. It helps support my work that I do. I'm teaching you how to navigate through the chaos that's ensuing from the Harvard Corporation. All right? Please help support my work. All right? All these videos I do are for free. Get the products. If you use discount 5, you get $5 off. And if you spend $150 or more on any order, you get a free gift until supplies last. So please help support my work. All right? And you also get entertained too. All right. We're in the allergy season. Pay attention to me. Mitigate allergens. The moment you have an irritation in your throat, attack it with the lozenges and the drops that I have. It's very important to mitigate it right away. Now, elderberry zinc is what I have in stock. You get 21 lozenges in each bag. This is made from the structural nano silver. And I also have drops, which are smaller. You get 100 in each bag. You can get it in honey and lemon, in cherry, and also in blueberry. All right? Very tasty, high quality, structural nano silver drops and lozenges. All right? Get a few bags for your household. Mitigate the irritant right away, and you'll be better off. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. And again, if you spend more than $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please help support my work, and I want you to support your health. Take the supplements and the products that I have on my store and listen to the holistic approach on how to stack the stuff, how to improve your body, and slow down the aging process. Alex Jones is younger than me. All right? Now, who do you think looks more healthy? Who do you think is more fit? Who do you think actually looks younger? Now, do you think that it's Alex Jones, or do you think it's DrPaulCottrell? Now, why would DrPaulCottrell, that's older than Alex Jones, look younger? Maybe it's the holistic approach and the stacking that he's been doing for a long time to slow down the aging process. Oh, so maybe it behooves you to actually listen and follow my advice.
So Tim, the bank managers have talked about planning for various paths that we could go forward from an economic standpoint, and they're prepared for that. I mentioned earlier, they reaffirmed guidance for the year, but they also acknowledge risks within that guidance in terms of the potential higher bad debt provisioning that could happen with a worsening economic backdrop, less capital markets fees because there's less M&A activity or less debt issuance, and less loan growth because typically loan growth does track with economic growth, and if we see less GDP growth, there will be less lending involved with these regional banks as well.
Well, a little over 2 years since that March 2023 regional banking crisis. Is this something that people still talk about on earnings calls, or is it a thing of the past?
It's a bit of old news at this point. While the stocks seem to gyrate, and some of the banks that were sort of in the crosshairs a little bit 2 years ago, banks like Western Alliance, banks like America, they've been hit a bit more relative to peers over the past couple of weeks, but for the most part, we haven't seen some of the increased concerns of deposit outflows or things like unrealized securities losses in the securities portfolio. So those are not really top of mind issues now. It's just more the economic uncertainty and where the economy goes from here.
Right. You know, if we can think all the way back to maybe, I don't know, the beginning of the year before we all got focused so much on these tariffs, there was a sense of animal spirits out there. There was a sense of maybe this new administration would be more M&A friendly.
That's right.
And as the regional banks, that seemed to be a salient point to me because one could argue that there's a sector that perhaps could see some consolidation that would be beneficial to shareholders.
Yeah.
Is there still that feeling in the regional bank community that this is an administration that would allow, maybe not encourage, but allow some consolidation?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of positive, constructive commentary from the administration talking about lessening capital rules for the banks and weakening some of the M&A rules that the Biden administration placed on the banks towards the end of the tenure. So that's all positive, and we've written about it recently, but we haven't really seen a lot of M&A activity. There was no M&A bank deal that was announced with a valuation over $1 billion in the first quarter. Despite some better constructive commentary from getting regulatory approval on these deals. That's something that will happen over time. We just haven't seen it given just the uncertainty with the economy and interest rates, and with less CEO confidence, these bank deals could be on pause for at least the near term.
Okay. Herman Chan, thank you so much for joining us. Herman Chan, he's the senior analyst covering the U.S. regional banks for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Again, kind of what we've seen from, as Herman was mentioning, for some of the regional banks, similar to what we heard from, the large money center banks, which is the first quarter was pretty darn good. And for the big banks, it was the capital markets businesses that really capitalized on the volatility in the markets, while their advisory businesses were seeing a slowdown in the business. But if you're in a regional bank, it's all about loan growth there, as Herman was just mentioning. So again, the first quarter results were decent. Going forward, a lot of uncertainty, and that's what we've heard from some other companies that have reported. Most notably today, United Airlines, who provided two sets of guidance, two scenarios, if you will, for the economy and how that might impact the results. So we'll see how other companies talk about their forward guidance here, if they do it at all. Dan Ives with Local Security says he expects a lot of these tech companies to actually not provide guidance as they typically do, so we'll stay on top of that. For our listeners in the U.S., reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio, Sirius XM channel 121, and that is previously brought to you by Warpath.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up in this hour, we're going to get the latest on the tariff news. Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg News reporter, she's going to give us the latest reporting there on this fluid situation. Then we're going to check in with Mary Short. She's a senior equity analyst at Columbia Threadneedle Investments. She joins us to give us the thoughts on what's happening in the world of retail sales as we gear up for another season of earnings here. Shanna Sissel, President and CEO at Banrion Capital Management, she's going to join us to give us her market outlook. So got a lot coming up in this hour as we stay on top of the markets where there is a sell-off here. We've got the S&P 500 off about 1% right here. So we'll keep an eye on that. Right now, let's go to Amy Mars and get world and national. We'll get a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Let's do it, Paul. The World Trade Organization slashing its forecast for merchandise trade this year. The WTO expects the volume of world merchandise trade to decline by 0.2% in 2025. It's about 3 percentage points lower than it would have been without the trade war, marking a dramatic reversal from expectations at the start of the year. That plus the tech sell-off that you were just talking about, that's moving markets lower. We do check markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 now down 1%, NASDAQ down 1.8%. The Dow is down about 0.25%. 10-year Treasury yield at 4.33% and the 2-year yield at 3.81%. Lizanne Saunders is chief market strategist at Charles Schwab and says it's anybody's guess as to whether markets hit bottom.
Tops and bottoms is a fool's errand. You know, based on history, even though there's not a lot of historical precedent for what we're dealing with now, it would not be uncommon to see a retest of the lows.
Charles Schwab chief market strategist Lizanne Saunders. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, you can subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney and Norma Linda.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Norma Linda sitting in for Alex Steele on Paul Sweeney. We are live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We are also streaming live on YouTube, so you can head over to youtube.com, search Bloomberg Podcast Live, and that's where you'll find us. As Amy was just mentioning, we do have red on the screen with the S&P off about 1% here today. Let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move today. We're joined by Bloomberg's Bailey Lipschultz. Bailey, what are you looking at?
I want to start with ASML, the semiconductor name, under pressure. ADR is down more than 5% in U.S. trading. One of the worst performers alongside the likes of Nvidia and AMD. This comes after ASML reported first quarter bookings that were below what Wall Street was looking for. Management team was talking up 2026 as a growth year, so normally not the kind of strength that you want to see. The one thing that did stand out from the earnings call and some of the commentary is, as of now, they're saying that tariffs haven't fundamentally changed their planning or discussions that they're having with customers, but they are continuing to monitor the situation. It is evolving, obviously, on a day when NVIDIA's under notable selling pressure after restrictions around its H20 chips being shipped to China. All eyes are on what's going on in the semi space, and obviously a lot of jitters, just given, broadly speaking, the run-up that we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, we're really seeing a lot of their peers taking it to the chin. We got the NASDAQ down about 1.9% right now. You're also looking at Interactive Brokers. What's going on there?
Yeah, this company reporting earnings, they trade under the ticker IBKR, down right now more than 9%, almost 10%. This comes after their EPS fell short of what analysts were looking for. Analysts are blaming the slide on their net interest income and higher expenses coming in below what analysts were looking for. The one thing that did stand out, looking through some of the notes, was the fact that they were seeing an issue around margin balances. And obviously, companies like IBKR and some of the other peers like Robinhood or Schwab benefit when people are trading stocks. Market volatility, though, and some of their ability to generate profits from loaning out those shares or people taking on debt to trade stocks, obviously being heavily impacted so far in the wake of Donald Trump's tariff kind of unveiling in the trade war that we've seen.
But it seems like, the retail traders are still trading. I've heard, you talked to Eric Baltunis on the ETF side from Bloomberg Intelligence. He says the funds keep flowing in despite the declines in a lot of, stocks and bonds and so on.
Yeah, we had a story. I had a story out yesterday, basically, that a lot of these individual investors don't care, and they view the sell-off as a reason to continue to buy the dip. The one thing that stood out to me was some data from J.P. Morgan said that retail investors, this was through Monday's close, since the tariffs were unveiled on April 2nd, they pumped almost $18 billion into the market. Wow. So a lot of
big number we're working with.
Yeah, exactly. The interesting thing is just the kind of vision that a lot of these individual investors have, that they don't really care. They think the stocks eventually will go back up. And
the last 15 years, they've been right.
Right.
Exactly. And that's the thing.
That's the thing. So you're also looking at JB Hunt, correct?
Yeah, so the size and scope is tough for most stocks, just given volatility. JB Hunt, which is in the trucking space, down more than 8%, trades under the ticker JBHT, trading at the lowest level since November 2020. Wow. So when you look at trucking and kind of the idea that transports help drive the U.S. economy, when you're seeing the impact from tariffs, you're seeing the broader economy weighing on trucking stocks. Again, missing expectations. They kind of blamed, obviously, macro uncertainty, rates pressure, but analysts really souring on the stock, slashing price targets. And again, you're looking at a company that right now down more than 8%, but over the last 12 months down 32%. So one of the losers on a broader.
Yeah, you see it. I mean, if you're calling for a slower trade, and then we had World Trade Organization today cut their outlook significantly for world trade, and maybe you're not going to be trading as much with your two closest neighbors, Canada and Mexico.
It's really
Man, that's a tough thing if you're a big nationwide trucker company.
Exactly, and it's been looking at it, even looking through some of the notes, like even though intermodal loads rose 7.6% year over year, they basically have been worrying about running the business, and they're actually cutting their CapEx spending. So trying to tighten the belt. Not only are we seeing consumers do that, but a number of companies now trying to kind of assess the landscape and rein in their own spending.
Yeah, and that's the type of stuff that doesn't get into the GDP data we see yet. I mean, let's put it yet, but you see it in the survey data that tries to look ahead a little bit. Right. And you see what the guidance for some of these companies, whether you're a transportation company like JB Hunt or an airline, we're starting to see it in the results in the outlook. Bailey Lipschultz, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Bailey Lipschultz, equities reporter for Bloomberg News. For more conversations like this, listen to our new Stock Movers podcast. Subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Listen to Stock Movers on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcast. Speaking of tariffs, we had some more news just recently. It seems like obviously it seems like something that is impacted on a daily basis, even intraday. And I believe President Trump says he will attend the tariff talks with Japan today. That's kind of interesting to me. Tyler Kendall, it's her job to follow this stuff for Bloomberg News. She's a reporter of Bloomberg News. She's down there in Washington, D.C. Tyler, just that news story here about President Trump says he will attend the tariff talks with Japan today. How unusual is that for a president to get involved himself in this level of talks?
Yeah, hey, Paul, it's actually considered to be pretty unusual. Normally, this is done at a leader-to-leader level, but instead we're seeing President Trump today saying that he will be there in person alongside his Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The administration is making it clear that President Trump says that he wants to be directly involved in these negotiations. And when we're talking about Japan, part of why we know or our understanding is that Japan will get priority in these talks is because Japan's Prime Minister did reach out directly to President Trump just last week, and that has helped sort of spur this relationship when it comes to the U.S. liking that and wanting to then engage with Japan. President Trump says that they're going to be talking about trade imbalances, but also what he characterized as military spending. That's something that perhaps could be one of those non-tariff barriers that this White House tells us so much about will ultimately need to be involved in these talks. And it's interesting to look at who this administration really is prioritizing beyond who has reached out directly to the U.S., but it's also those countries that are geographically close to China, like South Korea, India, Vietnam, all of these places that this White House is really trying to court as the trade negotiations remain stalled with Beijing.
Hey, Tyler, we've really seen Trump remaining fervent in this
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take a look at this stack that is the core, all right? There's 4 pillars to this core stack, all right? It's something that I, over time, have improved upon and experimented with to help with certain areas of your health, okay? So the first pillar is to use Max 35 or Max 14 or cleanse to boost up the immune system. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is C60 to soak up free radicals, to reduce stress in the cell and the tissue level. The third pillar is to take the ashwagandha, the turmeric, and the lignans to bring down inflammation, to boost up the immune system and help with the cardiovascular system. And that fourth pillar is to boost up your energy levels and to rev up your metabolism. And that's through Boomer Boost. That's the core, and you build off of that. So let's talk about the first pillar for a second. So I have different price points and different parts per million of this first pillar. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. Cleanse, it's used the same way, has 30 parts per million, and Max 35. So take either one of them. They're at different price points and at different parts per million. And you take it every day. Take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and swallow. It's going to help with your immune system, right? It's going to boost it up. It's really important. But do it every day. You're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day, and then once you're feeling better, go back to your maintenance dose of a tablespoon or of a teaspoon a day. But it's important to take every day, all right? So get the Max 35 or the Max 14 or Cleanse. They're all at different price points. And apply this pillar process, this pillar stack that I just mentioned, all right? We're going to continue on through this transmission, and I'm going to be talking about how to stack other supplements with this core. But it's important to bring down that inflammation, soak up those free radicals, neutralize, boost up those energy levels. And when you do that, you're really supercharging these different organ systems that we'll be talking about. So please go to my store, get the Max 14, the Max 35, or Cleanse. They're at different price points. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. And if you purchase $150 or more on any order, you will get a free gift as long as supplies last. Now, I have anti-aging boxes and longevity boxes that are at a discount, built-in discount compared to purchasing the products individually on my store. And you can apply discount 5 on top of that. So there's many ways to save money. I know people are hurting that, you know, cash flows may not be that great, but you want to get the products, all right? So I've designed these boxes in such a way where you get a lot of great supplements, you follow this holistic approach, and they're at a reasonable price level, all right? I want these products in your hand because they work. You follow my advice, take them the way I'm taking them, and you're going to improve your health, all right? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Just a reminder, we are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and simulcasting on X Spaces. Anyone that has a question or a comment about the news that we're covering today, please type it in the chat or ask for the mic and you can be on the show live.
Be unclear, uncertain, volatile. I've met with many companies over the past couple of weeks, and honestly, they're, I would say, just as confused as investors and consumers are at this point. I just met with one company earlier today who said this volatility is even worse than what they experienced during the pandemic. So that just shows you, how they are really still trying
to go through the volatility of Lehman. I was literally on the trading floor when GM went bankrupt. And I was born and raised in Detroit.
The impact on a lot of the companies that I particularly in the apparel and footwear categories is very significant.
It's interesting that you mentioned that in terms of volatility and uncertainty, you're saying that this is worse than it was in the pandemic, one of the most unprecedented time periods. What are you hearing from people? Does it seem
Was she born like yesterday? Lehman was a lot worse than COVID, all right, in terms of illiquid markets. And, now 2020 crash was bad, but the thing was, it was a V recovery. And if people listened, I told them to get out before it happened. And I also told them how to trade into the recovery. These people, you can tell that they're not experienced.
Still coming out of the pandemic where we were seeing demand normalization and deflation in a lot of bigger ticket categories. And so I think, of course, we still have to see what the final results are. But in my view, the 90-day pause does not really change the end result. There are still no easy answers as to how the companies will mitigate these higher costs. And I think as a result of that, a lot of them will end up flowing through to the consumer in the form of higher inflation.
Are there certain categories, Mary, that retailers can pass along the cost increases more readily than in some other areas, historically speaking?
It's a great question. I think it's a little bit harder to talk category. It's easier to talk brand because, of course, there are certain companies that have that have been performing very well, have very strong brand momentum, and product innovation. So in that.
All right. Mari, Columbia Threadneedle Investments, senior equity analyst, senior. And she thinks that our crisis is, the 2020 crisis. That's a junior analyst. Fucking A, man.
Consumers are willing to spend on new innovation. Outside of that, it's harder to identify areas where I think the companies will be able to pass through higher pricing without seeing a negative impact on unit demand.
All right, very good. Mari Shore, thank you so much for joining us. Mari is a senior equity analyst at Columbia Threadneedle up there in Boston, joining us via Zoom. It just feels that if they can, I would think pretty much most retailers would try to push along.
Almost definitely. I mean, why wouldn't you in this scenario?
No, and we saw that, during initial stages of inflation several years ago.
Just take my advice. Buy into the market slowly, accumulate shares. You're going to be better off in 12 months. Trust me. Trust me on this. And oh, by the way, get my products and your immune system will be boosted up too.
We have Shana Sissel. She's going to join us. She's over there at Banbrion Capital Management. Get her thoughts on these markets. And Michael Shepard, Bloomberg senior editor in Washington, D.C. He'll give us the latest reporting on the U.S.-China technology. So we've got that all coming up. We'll take a look at the markets here. We have selling. We got the S&P off 55 points. That's 1%. Selling is more pronounced than the tech-heavy NASDAQ. That's down 315 points. That's 1.9%. The Dow's doing better.
No, have you noticed? It's selling. Well, let me give you my perspective on the update. All right, and notice the difference, the compare and contrast between Bloomberg and Paulberg. All right. Now the S&P 500 is trading at 5,342. All right. So the S&P 500 is down about 53 points. All right. The VIX index is just hovering slightly above 30. So it's elevated, but since the open, it has been going down. Euro USD is trading at 1.13. Oil is trading at $62.45 a barrel. And Bitcoin ETF, BITO, is trading at 18.5 and is moving upward. So Bitcoin is going up. All right. Now remember what I said, that Bitcoin's correlation with equities is usually positively correlated. Not always, but right now it's been, and there's a big move upward with Bitcoin now. So it's now trading at just below 85,000 token. So the ETF for Bitcoin is moving upward, and the USD Japanese yen is trading at 142.6, and I'm concerned that if the yen strengthens and breaks the 140 barrier, that the BOJ, you're going to start hearing in the news, the BOJ is going to start intervening in the market. All right? They may not intervene right when it breaks, but you're going to start hearing more news about it. And they'll be signaling, because they'll be signaling they're going to be intervening, and they'll be warning the market, trying to get that yen to weaken a little bit and go above the 140 barrier. And if it doesn't work, then they're going to intervene, and they're going to adjust the currency. They're going to try to weaken the currency. The currency, the yen is strengthening. That's a sign of international stress. Okay? Now trust me on this. Now, but we're still playing off of that news from Nvidia with the H20 being not sold in China. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. Now let's go to Al Jazeera. They're talking about Trump and criticizing the different universities here.
Trump says it, and then the head of the IRS decides to have a look at that. That could well happen, and it's more likely to happen now, of course, because Donald Trump has said it. This is going to go to the courts, there's no doubt about it. Donald Trump wants to make sure that these universities are doing exactly what he says. And these universities, private universities, are saying, look, the government should not be involved in telling us who to hire, what to teach, or how we carry out our programs. They're giving us money for research, and we are carrying out the research. Will it go as far as the research?
Yeah, but money is fungible. If that money didn't come from the government, they would have to cut programs. Maybe DEI programs, maybe, these woke programs, maybe these gender study programs. Maybe they would cancel these programs that actually have curriculums that how to destroy America. Brought to you by a woke Harvard professor.
With executive orders agreed to provide free legal services to causes Trump supports. The president has also targeted the media. He wants CBS Network's broadcast license revoked over coverage he said was inaccurate. Let's now speak to David Armitage, who's a professor of history at Harvard University. He joins us from Cambridge, Massachusetts in the U.S. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us on Al Jazeera. President Donald Trump has gone as far as threatening to classify Harvard as a political entity. First of all, from your historical perspective, how unprecedented is this kind of targeted pressure against educational institutions and the media in America?
In the US itself, it's entirely unprecedented. Historically, we might think back to the so-called Red Scare of the 1950s when individual faculty members were targeted for their political views, but nothing on this scale of attacking whole institutions and indeed higher education as a whole. But if we look across the world to other countries like Turkey, Hungary, or India, for instance, in the contemporary world, we've seen concerted attacks by autocrats on higher education as part of their larger attacks on civil society, free speech, and freedom of thought, very much like this.
In the case of the U.S., is the attack on elite universities by the administration simply because they're full of people who don't support Donald Trump? Is this about ideology, or is there a broader cultural or political strategy here to delegitimize higher education and intellectualism, or the kind of critical inquiry that these universities represent?
I think your last point is correct. It is to delegitimize not just higher education, but any source of independent critical opposition to an incipiently autocratic regime. As you mentioned, or your correspondent mentioned a few moments ago, we have to see this attack on higher education as being linked to the attack on law firms and on the press and other parts of civil society which hold up a critical mirror to the actions of the current administration. And although the administration says that it wants to protect freedom of expression and freedom of thought, what that means is freedom to say what they want and to support their policies, not to provide alternatives to that, whether in terms of a political opposition or in terms of a factually based critique of what the administration...
Now, the question was, during the history of Harvard, in the history of the United States, or the history of just the beginnings of the nation, was there some sort of precedence of intervention of government into Harvard's affairs? George Washington's army took over Harvard during the Revolution. You don't believe me? Look it up.
The world. So the funding cuts we've been hearing about in the last 2 days are affecting research on Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and cancer research, for example. That's not something which is purely national or parochial. That's an international and global contribution that American higher education makes in the present to the world and has been making for 70 years. This is another part of the Trump administration's effort to make America less relevant globally by undercutting precisely not just its soft power, but its actual contributions to the health and security of the world at large.
But what would you say, Professor Armitage, to those who argue that institutions like Harvard are too powerful today, too insulated, and should be held to political scrutiny? What's the line between accountability and overreach?
We are very accountable. We have changed our admissions policies in light of the recent Supreme Court decision about race-based admissions. We've been scrutinizing ourselves very thoroughly internally about anti-Semitism and other complaints from students about feeling constrained in various ways or under attack. This is the very mission of the university, always to be submitting itself to scrutiny as well as to a wider range of ideas and practices as well. This is what we do. This is the process of critical
Oh,
thought.
really? If you do self-reflection, why are there like 90% of the faculty liberal or ultra-liberal? Where's the conservatives? Don't you think that a well-balanced faculty would be a good crucible for students to pick what path they want or how they want to be influenced? But if 90% of your professors are ultra-woke, pushing an agenda like communism, socialism, don't you think that you're going to produce communists and socialists? I mean, you know, you would think, right? All right, let's go back to Bloomberg, and we're talking about stagflation.
RDFI, which is a closed-end fund, arbitrage fund, things of that nature is what we're really focusing on. Those are the ones that have done quite well. I took a look at them last week, preparing something for our clients, and all of those products have outperformed the market, some more than others, but they're all low to no correlation. They all have a hedge, and they're all designed to help to mitigate volatility in the markets. These things hadn't been particularly popular until recently.
If you hedge for volatility, and so you're making money on volatility, and it's a fund and not in and out trading, all right, but it's a fund and it's locked in, most of the time you're going to lose money. You know why? Because if you look at the VIX index, high volatility moments are episodic and then die down, and then there's like 3 months of calm, and then it comes back up, and then dives down really quick. It's called heterosydastic. All right. So you would be only making money every 3 months and missing out between the calm periods within the VIX index. That's why these funds get a lot of popularity during stressful situations and make no money, lose money during the calms, the period. And you look at the VIX index, most of the time throughout the year, the VIX is at a calm situation. It's not, you don't have elevated risk ever that's at the 50s or 40s for months on end. It never happens. Just look, if you don't believe me, just look at a 10-year or 20-year time series. Trust me, when these episodes happen with the VIX elevating up and the stock market sells off, buy. That's the best time to buy. Clowns.
See, joins us here. Michael, what did you make of the news out of Nvidia, and can you extrapolate it out to other companies, other sectors maybe?
Well, we already see one extrapolation playing out in the market today, Paul, and that is advanced micro devices. Nvidia told the world yesterday it was facing this charge related to the new restrictions from the Trump administrations on sales of its H20 chip to China. But now AMD comes out today and says it too is facing similar curbs on its ability to sell a similar product, a device known as the MI308. Both of these were designed to comply with previous U.S. curbs and restrictions on sales of advanced microprocessors to China. The idea of those limits is that you don't, officials here in Washington don't want China's government or Chinese companies to gain too much of a technological edge when it comes to products that could have dual use for the military or potentially give Beijing a leg up in this race for artificial intelligence. So we are hearing from it, and other companies will have to keep their eye out for further restrictions, especially, Paul, as we see this trade war intensifying.
So no one wants to hear this type of news, especially for AI darlings, someone like Nvidia, especially with tariff uncertainty and the degree of those impacts still unknown. What is the environment like in Washington? What are people hearing in regards to this whole tariff stuff?
Now, case in point on why to buy the broad index and not these individual stocks. All right. What happened last night and late in the trading session yesterday in the US. Negative news about Nvidia not being able to sell the H20 chips to China. All right. Sell off in Asia market. All right. So there's further stress because of the tariff issue between China and the United States, and the national security issue with the whole artificial intelligence, with these chips being provided to China. Okay, now, remember what I said about staying away from individual stocks or being too heavily weighted on a particular sector. A lot of these portfolio managers, to beat the market, beta, to get alpha, all right? So you have beta, right, which is the market. And certain individual stocks may be a little bit below beta or a little bit above beta, all right? And you try to position a portfolio in such a way where you are not too diversified, where you're just having the same results as the index because that's your benchmark, and your portfolio is performing better than the benchmark, better than the index. The problem is that you're adding risk to do that. And it's a summation of these other idiosyncratic risks from these individual stocks. So what has happened for these institutional investors to try to beat the S&P 500, they overweighted tech. Well, tech's selling off. So now these portfolio managers their portfolio was benefiting when the stock market was going up, and it was going up faster because they were overweighted a sector. But now they have that idiosyncratic risk, like H20 chips can't be sold to China now, and the whole tech sector is selling off. This is the reason why I said broad index is better to go. How could you have known 24, 48, 72 hours ago that H20 chips weren't going to be sold in China and how it was going to sell off the tech sector? You couldn't know. How would you position it? That's why don't follow my advice. Don't get stupid, because these kinds of things will happen to you if you overweight a sector or if you just buy individual stocks. Let's say you put all of your money in Nvidia. You're fucked. You are fucked. You are totally fucked. Once again, DrPaulCottrell's right.
Poured it out with some of our biggest trade partners.
Well, they certainly are under some pressure to act, and members of Congress are increasingly concerned that this sweeping tariffs package from the Trump administration could carry some economic blowback that would be felt in their districts and could make it hard for them to win re-election in the upcoming congressional elections in 2026. And they're also worried about how the blowback from that could affect their districts and their standing too with the folks back home.
Let me get this straight. So our representatives are worried that they're not going to get reelected because the little person is getting hurt. Meanwhile, they have two ears. They have a small ear listening to the one that's voting them in, the middle class. And they have one big ear that's really focused on K Street and the lobbying group. All right? And paying for their campaigns through PAC money. And so they're trying to scare you. Okay, I'm live again with Rumble. Apologize for the problem with that. So Bloomberg was, pushing, be fearful, that Trump is doing these things and it's going to hurt the economy. Well, wait a minute here. This issue that we have with this issue that we're having with today's sell-off, which is not that bad of a sell-off. It's only down by, on the S&P 500, 36 points. It's not that big of a deal. Oh my God, the sky's falling. That's what Bloomberg's trying to scare people into thinking, right? The reality of the situation is a great opportunity to buy if you have some money. Don't be fearful on this, all right? But they want to push this fear onto you, all right? Because who's going to lose the most? The globalists, the ones that have lots of money positioned to benefit from labor arbitrage. Now, the middle class doesn't have that much money in the stock market. So they're not going to be hurt as much. But those multinational corporations, ooh, they would be hurt a lot. Because just pay attention to what's going on with TikTok, all right? You have these Chinese doing these TikTok videos showing how the markups are so exuberant, all right? So they make a Nike shoe, all right? And let's say they're selling a Nike shoe at, I don't know, like $200 or whatever, all right? But let's say to make it only costs 10. There's a huge markup there. So you're telling me that Nike can't absorb 100% or 125% tariff? No, they could. They could easily absorb it, is the point. They could easily absorb it. Now, of course, their share price will go down, but why should their share price be that high anyways? With taking advantage of this labor arbitrage. So that's the real issue here. Now, they also want to scare you and say, oh my God, the sell-off with Nvidia, with the chips not being sold to China, the H20 chips, and that middle-class America should be pissed off at Trump. These chips, even though they're lower-end chips, if you buy enough of them and you stack them and you start training them, you'll build up an AI system that can literally help with their defense development. Well, that's not going to be really a good idea if the United States needs to go to war with China. Now, do you think it's going to be the K Street kids, all right, the lobbying group kids that are going to Harvard and to Yale and to Brown and to UPenn, you think their kids are going to be fighting the war? No, I don't think so. It'll be the middle class kids, the poor kids that are fighting the war. But the rich that benefited from selling Nvidia chips to China because they wanted asset appreciation for their stock, sold America down the road so the Chinese can use artificial intelligence to build their weapon systems. I'm telling you, these people are evil. They will sell their grandmother down the river for $1, not for $2 or $5 or $10, for $1. Unbelievable. All right, let me do a product placement because this is capitalism. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and all kidding aside, pay attention to the stacks that I mentioned to get healthy, all right? Multivitamin that I have on my store is easy to digest, all right? And this label is shown on the screen here. You can also read the label on my website, but this will be a good foundation to start with to build off of, all right? Take this multivitamin every day. Now, multivitamins and minerals are really important for enzymatic activity. They're cofactors for enzymes. So your cells will perform better, your tissues will perform better when you have the right nutrients, when you have the right cofactors. So make sure you take this multivitamin. It's easy to digest. Take it every day, drink it with filtered water, and stack it with other products that I have. Now, another product that I have that you should stack it with the multivitamin, and you should be taking this every day, is the probiotics that I have. I have a powdered version and also a veggie cap version. Both are very high quality. Take it every day. Now, with taking a probiotic, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. It's going to improve your immune system in your gut. The mucosal lining will improve. Your concentrations of IgA will go up. you're reducing leaky gut syndrome, and you're reducing the chances of having problems with the stem cells in your crypt that are in the crypt of your inner lining of your gut. And you're reducing the probability of mutations. Because if you have lots of inflammation and a poor gut biome, what's going to happen is you're increasing the chances of polyps. All right? Also, make sure you do your cancer screenings. Really important. All right? Don't be afraid of colonoscopies. All right? People die because they're afraid to take them, to get a colonoscopy, literally. Screenings are the best outcome in terms of fighting cancer. So make sure you catch it early. Now, by improving your gut, you're also improving your metabolism, and you're improving the communication between your gut and your liver, which is a major detox organ, and your gut and your brain. You'll be able to think better, you'll be able to sleep better, you'll be less irritable. And a good gut biome has, this research is showing, is starting to get published, especially out of Europe, where a good gut biome is actually helping with brain health and reducing the chances of early onset of dementia. So it behooves you to get a good gut biome. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotics, either the veggie cap version or the powder version. I prefer taking the powder version because I take some of these powders like the collagen and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost and the lignin. So I take lots of powders, so it's just easier to just mix it all together. But please go to my store, help support my work, and help support your health. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. You spend $150 or more, and you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. With that said, let's go back to Harvard bets on conservative lawyer to fight Trump on funds.
Really? He's represented a lot of billionaires and different people in political settings in the Trump world. And he's considered to be an excellent courtroom advocate and also a very skilled negotiator. So by hiring Bill Burke, Harvard is essentially saying this is someone who we think has real skills to help.
Well, let me get this straight. The Harvard Corporation, which is really the funding of Harvard University, which is a hedge fund with books, pushing a woke agenda, hires a conservative lawyer to try to fight Trump. Now, I would have to take the idea that even the Harvard Corporation doesn't trust woke lawyers. It's better to be conservative.
It's never a good strategy to sue the U.S. government, in my opinion. I mean, it just seems like that's a tough road to hoe. What is the strategy for Harvard? How far do they want to take this? How do you think this plays out?
They're going to lose.
Well, suing the government sometimes works, and it has worked in the second Trump administration for a number of plaintiffs. But I think that the real strategy is to negotiate, and you can either negotiate with or without a lawsuit. A lawsuit can begin a process of negotiation, and I think Harvard would concede that probably that they have some ability to withhold money, but not all the money that they are withholding.
So, taking it to the federal government can take a while. Is it worth it? I mean, $2.2 billion sounds like a lot to me, but is this money that Harvard really needs?
I think Harvard would say that it is, that it's been very important money for their medical research, for their engineering research.
Not all the money, people need to wake up to this. When you do a grant, not all the money goes to the principal investigator, what's called a PI, all right? Some of that money actually gets thrown into a pool for the university as a bucket. So it's like almost like a surcharge, all right? So stop pretending that all that money is going to go to pure science research. Some of that is being scraped up by the university to fund other things. Now, sometimes it's 40%, sometimes it's 10%, sometimes it's 60%. It just depends, all right? But not every single dollar is going to that PI for research. It's being scraped. Now, how much it's being scraped, I think depends on the grant. That's another thing that most people don't realize. And that's the reason why Harvard wants that money, because they need it to fund their operations. It's not, they need that scrape that they're going to be doing.
And they're saying, who's going to do all this research and development for us? Well, let's use the scientists that are already on these campuses and already have these labs there. That's kind of what developed post-World War II. And that's been the reason, and that has created all the great technology and advancements that the U.S. government's had.
But most of the research, most of the breakthroughs are not coming from Harvard or MIT or Stanford. Most of it is coming from state schools, especially if they're part of the R1 and the R2 Carnegie classification. So wake up, Sweeney. Fuck.
Those investments can't be made with no strings attached, that there are essentially important strings that involve following civil rights law. And their position is that Harvard is not following existing civil rights law.
Got it.
So the question is, how much leverage does the government really have over Harvard? And that's what we're waiting to find out.
So are people expecting, we've seen other universities, we've seen Trump say something and then they kind of buckle, they cower, and they let it go. That being said, are we expecting this with Harvard rather? Do we expect them to remain steadfast on this journey against, the U.S. government, or are people thinking that they may end up backing down?
Well, that's what we're waiting to find out. I mean, the position that Harvard's taking now is that we refuse your demands, and we're going to sit tight and fight you, and they will do that until they don't. I'm sure that it's a bit of a negotiating position, and we'll see what they're able to extract in the weeks and months ahead.
Harvard's hired this high-profile attorney, but they have not yet sued the U.S. government. Is that a decision they could take, and what would they sue for? Just to block them?
A lawsuit seems like a distinct possibility. It hasn't happened yet. Essentially, they have two arguments, as I understand it, which they've outlined in letters to the government. One is that this is a violation of their protected First Amendment rights, and the other is that the government did not follow the correct procedure in withholding this money. But both of those are viable legal claims that could work in a federal court. It depends on how they're argued and how the judge views it.
Sorry, so we'll be on, well, I guess we'll just kind of wait and see. Kind of the next step is ball's probably in Harvard's court, right?
At this point, it seems like the ball is in Harvard's court, because earlier this week, the federal government froze the $2.2 billion that they had promised to Harvard, and now the question is, what is Harvard's reaction going to be?
Every other university is just holding its breath, keep its head down. David Variakos, a legal reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us live here on our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, giving us the latest reported here, reporting on this fight between Harvard and the Trump administration. Again, the latest news is Harvard has hired a pretty high-profile attorney with strong, conservative bona fides, and was the relationship with many folks within the Trump administration. Maybe that would be helpful to maybe gaining some resolution here. Markets continue to sell off here. The S&P 500 is off 52 points. That's about 1%. And the Nasdaq's off about 1% here as well. Coming up, we'll have some more reporting on this market as we continue to deal with high volatility. We'll have more coming up this week.
Sounds like Bloomberg's having a problem. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the third pillar of this core protocol that I was talking about, bringing down the inflammation. That's going to help with your cardiovascular system and your immune system. Really important. I've been telling people to do this since 2020. So the ones that have been paying attention, guess what? You're benefiting from it. The ones that didn't pay attention, tough. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the turmeric. This will soak up free radicals and bring down pro-inflammatory cytokines. It's going to bring down that inflammation. By bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing the chance of plaque buildup. And systemically, by bringing down inflammation, you're helping with your immune system. A lot of people don't realize that pro-inflammatory cytokines chronically will actually be immunosuppressive. Now you wonder why people get sick so often, especially when they get older and they're inflamed, and they get sick more often, and they build up free radicals and they age faster. Ashwagandha root bring down cortisol levels and also blood glucose levels. By controlling your blood glucose levels and controlling your cortisol levels, you're going to help with that inflammation, that inflammatory process. You're going to bring down that inflammation. You're going to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular. Take the turmeric and the ashwagandha, stack it with lignans also to get a further boost, to improve lowering that inflammation and boosting up that immune system. Boosting up your immune system is really important. Slow down the aging process so you're just healthier, and it allows your body to heal. And the more that it heals, and the less time that you are chronically sick, your body is going to slow down its aging. It's that simple. Get the turmeric, get the ashwagandha, get the lignans, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. Let's take a look at some of the news that has been posted. I want to go to Fox Business here.
I'm Steve Ballmer, a data nerd who founded USA Facts, and here's a quick take on a hot topic.
All right, let's talk about some old-fashioned budget cutting. Join me now is OMB Director Russ Vogt, my great friend. Russ, welcome. So, as we know, you broke some news today already. We got a rescission. You are sending up a rescission of $9.4 billion. USAID and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting couldn't happen to a nicer bunch. My question to you is there more coming?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the things we want to see is what the appetite is to pass this. The Hill has been clamoring for us to send some of the Doge cuts. This is the first in a series that we're ready to go on. You have the $1 billion for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is predominantly the NPR and PBS, which is giving us leftist news for decades and cultural indoctrination for the last 4 or 5 years. That is incredibly problematic when you talk about children's programming that includes a drag queen, when you talk about documentaries pushing reparations and white privilege. And then you get to the straight Doge cuts at $8.3 billion at USAID, which the country has been shocked by as they've become out there in the public domain. Sesame Street for Iraqis, pushing vegan education in Zambia, electric buses in Rwanda. You just go every single program that the USAID funds. Not only is it wasteful, but you actually get a sense of the extent to which that agency was pushing weaponized cultural indoctrination in other countries. And then we step back and we wonder why they hate us so much. This bill puts an end to it. We do want to see it pass. And so we're working with the House and the Senate. They've assured us that we're going to have successful votes on
what these liberals have done. Let me just stop this video. What these liberals have done is they've used freedom of speech, which I support. All right, obviously, I support the First Amendment, but they're using these institutions to promote this ultra-liberal agenda and slowly erode over time God, country, and family. And they're using NPR and PBS as a conduit. Another conduit are the universities. Now, to bring back a functioning democracy, you got to root out the ones that are trying to destroy the democracy. You think that NPR wants communism, all right? And these ultra lib professors at Harvard, they don't want a functioning democracy. They want socialism. That's not a democracy. And we don't even have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic. We actually don't want a democracy because that's mob rule. That's the majority rules. Well, if you don't have property rights and the majority rules, how do you protect your property rights? See the problem with democracy? So the whole reality of the situation is that they're trying to destroy our constitutional republic that supports property rights, right? You don't believe me? Read the papers, the Federalist Papers of Madison and Hamilton. There's lots that they discussed in those papers, all right? And the theme is that we have a constitutional republic where we protect property. But NPR, PBS, Harvard, they're trying to erode the ethos of the Federalist Papers. And then when they get into trouble, they go to the law school and try to find a conservative to fight against Trump, who's trying to actually save the country. I mean, we're liberal. Like I said, in 2025, we're going to see 10 years of history in this year. 10 years of history this year. Now, we're only in April 16th. April 16th. And look at what has happened. Okay, let me continue. I apologize for going on a tangent. But that's why you joined this show, right? To see me go off on tangents.
That leads me to this question. I don't know. I think at the last count, the Doge postings was 150 billion in savings. Okay, I may be off a little bit, but that number rings a bell. If I'm way off, you can tell me. But my question is, how much of that 150 billion would go into additional rescissions, and or how much of it would go into the budget reconciliation package, which I hope folks understand is separate from a rescission, although they both only need a majority vote in the Senate and House. Now, is there a big Doge package coming down the road, or is that going to go into reconciliation, or what?
So reconciliation is a mandatory exercise. So you're dealing with programs that are on autopilot. We talk about those as the welfare programs, the benefit hammocks. We used to have a social safety net. Now we have these programs that are largely keeping people out of the workforce. That's the kind of conversation that you're having in a reconciliation context, where you have the benefit of getting fast-tracked through the Senate, at least without regard to the Senate filibuster. Doge cuts are discretionary, particularly the waste, fraud, and abuse. There's obviously a great amount of work being done on improper payments. But as it pertains to the savings at all these agencies, that is a discretionary process that happens as part of the annual budget process. Rescissions is probably the only part of the Impoundment Control Act that you and I like, Larry, in the sense that it allows us to send up a bill, avoid the Senate filibuster, get an up or down vote. We probably dislike the rest of the Impoundment Control Act, that it precludes or has wrongly been viewed to preclude the president's ability to just not spend the money later in the year. But those are two different trains, both of them very important, from the standpoint of what our fiscal trajectory is to get to balance. But we'll be working on both of those areas.
So I guess, the answer is the Doge stuff.
Let me just interrupt here. So there's a little bit of an additional sell-off here. The S&P 500 is now trading 62 points lower from the close yesterday, and it's trading at 5,332. Just a reminder, there's a support level at 5,150, and there's another support level at 4,810. So we're above both of those support levels, so not to panic. But there is an increased elevation of VIX. It's above 30 now. It's at 30.9. So the ones that are reading that dashboard, that's live feed on my website or on YouTube. Also take a look at the 12. Also take a look at the BITO ETF for Bitcoin. It's trading at 18.49. You can see that as the market started to sell off, so did that ETF. So there's a bit of a positive correlation there. What is interesting is that the oil market is still trading above $62 a barrel. As the market was starting to sell off, we saw a little bit more of a strengthening of the Japanese yen. It's at 142.54.
We'll go into the reconciliation bill. Yes?
Again, the reconciliation is a mandatory exercise. The Doge savings are discretionary.
Oh, so
that goes through rescissions and goes through the annual appropriations process.
So that's not going to go into reconciliation. So that's a separate crusade. Because I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not alone. If you've got 150 billion thus far, the year's only a third over, or whatever it is. That's a heck of a lot of money. And how's that money going to be permanently saved? What happens to that money? Do I just write an X over the check? In other words, Elon's doing the Lord's work. His group that was doing the Lord's work, I interviewed Elon, and then Brett Baer interviewed his top lieutenants. What happens to their savings, Russ Vogt? That's what I'm asking.
Larry, come and see him to a theater near you, but the first step that we have is that to the extent that the amounts of money that have to be passed by Congress, we're going to start to send them up to Congress and get them voted on. But we have a lot of executive tools at our disposal. You and I have talked about them before. We're not there yet. We're still going through a programmatic review on a lot of these things and their authorities. But I think you're like the efforts that we're putting in the plan that we have in place to be able to make those savings permanent for the taxpayer over the next several months.
All right, well, that's very important. Final point is, you mentioned the trajectory. You have these 10-year estimates. I know. They are what they are. Are you on the right track? I mean, at the end, are you where you want us to be looking out 10 years when you submit your official budget or when the House and Senate, they're talking about $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. Is that enough? I know we got to have growth, and we're not going to have growth if there's an income tax hike, but let's not talk about that. We've already beaten that one. Are you where you want to be, Russ Vogt? That's what I'm asking. Just the last 25 seconds.
I would say from the standpoint of where we are in a new administration, we've never seen anything like this. So in terms of the amounts coming in from tariffs, the enthusiasm, when was the last time we had Congress asking for a rescissions bill? And then to have the fight in Congress being on the budget resolution, we have to go north of $1 trillion. That would be the most historic mandatory reforms we've seen since the mid-1990s. And so I couldn't be happier. Is there a lot of hard work to do and be done? Absolutely. But in terms of the momentum and the center of gravity of the city, what we're going to come along later and present with the president's budget once we get to it, as soon as we can, we know folks are waiting on it. You're going to see a balanced budget. You're going to see a healthy fiscal trajectory, and we couldn't be in a better position.
Balanced budget, two great words, two lost words. Russ Vogt, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'll be here.
All righty.
The Silverado Trail.
Let's go to Al Jazeera here for a sec.
With the U.S. is yet to be felt. Katrina Yu reports from Beijing.
China's economy is growing, according to the country's Bureau of Statistics, bolstered by a nationwide scheme providing hefty discounts for households trading in old appliances. And
now, Miss Taiwan is saying that people large corporations have been front-loading the orders to get around this whole tariff issue. So there was a big set of orders that were going into China that their economy is now benefiting from, and that helped boost up the economy. But they were all front-loaded. They don't have a very robust domestic consumption. So they have to lower prices on top of not being able to sell additional goods to the United States because of the tariff war with Trump now. They're not going to be able to take the slack. The domestic demand isn't there. So it's predicted that the next quarter is going to be bad for China, assuming that they don't solve this problem with Trump in the interim.
government into conceding to US President Donald Trump.
It has to tolerate the pain. I think there's a way that politics works here in China. You have basically a coordinated position. You can't concede, can't back off. It would be huge political consequences if you do that.
Beijing has promised more stimulus to spur domestic consumption, with support expected for the property, catering, and tourism sectors.
China's economic performance from January to March shows there was momentum toward achieving the government's target of 5% for the year. But analysts say the escalating trade war with the United States makes that goal much harder to achieve.
Officials are projecting confidence in China's economy, but admit it will take what they have described as more arduous efforts to promote recovery. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Hong Kong's Postal Service says it will stop shipping small parcels to the United States. It's in response to what the self-governing territory describes as unreasonable bullying by the U.S. Earlier this month, the U.S. announced it would end a customs exemption on small value parcels from Hong Kong and China. From May the 2nd, they'll be subject to a 120% tariff. Laura Westbrook is following the reaction from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong is wading into the trade war. The government says Hong Kong Post will stop accepting parcels containing goods destined for the United States. Mail containing documents such as letters won't be affected. And the government says this is in response to what it calls bullying U.S. tariffs on postal items. Earlier, President Donald Trump moved to eliminate a customs exemption that allowed goods worth less than $800 from Hong Kong and mainland China to enter the U.S. duty-free. From May the 2nd, these parcels will face a 120% tariff. The government also warned people sending items via other services to the U.S. that they should be prepared to pay what it says are exorbitant fees due to America's unreasonable acts. U.S. trade taxes affect goods from Hong Kong and mainland China sent to the U.S. Hong Kong operates as a separate customs territory, but since Beijing imposed a national security...
On the news feed on the dashboard, some news came up for Bank of America. Bank of America adjusts price target on Texas Instruments from $176. Wait. B of A adjusts price target on Texas Instruments to $176 from $220. So they lowered their price target for Texas Instruments. They've also lowered their price target for Advanced Micro Devices, AMD. It's now at 110 from 135. Target price for Wolfspeed to $3 from $6. So we're starting to see adjustments on individual stocks coming in, and also the WTO brought down their target for global activity. All right, let's shift over to Bloomberg here. I think they're in balance of power now.
And now the Trump administration, and even the first Trump administration, have been eyeing the risk that China could gain some either military or technology edge through its acquisition of advanced semiconductors. So we've seen over the years this cascading and escalating series of restrictions designed to keep China's tech prowess really at bay and in check. This chip, however, did show promise in one area, and that's known as inference when it comes to artificial intelligence. And this is an area that allows models, once they've been trained, to actually start to make some decisions on their own, if you will. And that is something that helped to fuel DeepSeek. And it is a capability that other AI startups in China are seeking to exploit. And it's sort of a loophole, but the loophole is sort of baked into the chip in a way. And the Biden administration had been weighing whether to actually take this step even before they left office, but instead we saw a different rule that they put out really within the last week of the president's term. That was the so-called AI diffusion rule that set global limits on the amount of computing power that any one country or company really could acquire. But this takes direct aim at China, and it was really something that was written in the stars in a lot of ways.
So does that mean that licenses, which technically is what this is about, you have to apply for a license to export this to China, are basically out of the question?
In the current environment, and when we look at the rhetoric between Washington and Beijing, there really doesn't seem to be any sort of room for a concession. You hear Donald Trump talk about trying to link TikTok, for example, to tariff reductions, but we're not hearing officials in Beijing even trying to broach that aspect of the conversation. So the idea that Washington would yield ground on something that is seen as so critical to U.S. national and economic security it is kind of far afield, I would say. And it's, in theory, on paper, a license, but in effect, really are seeing bans.
Well, and to that point, Mike, that this is not just a kind of technology war, if you will, but
it's really important to understand that as the economy starts to go down in China, President Xi's internal struggle with the CCP is going to increase. And then the question is, will he try to galvanize his base of supporters and try to unify China by taking over Taiwan, which will launch a war with the United States? All right, so this is not just a tariff war. And not only is the chips just a banning of artificial intelligence chips, this is literally, we're moving towards an escalation in the Pacific, which I've been saying was going to happen going all the way back to 2020. All right? The PLA, in their white papers, have telegraphed that they were going to make a move in 2025 through 2027 on Taiwan. Now, the question is it going to happen? Now, historical precedent shows that when you have a weak leader that needs to try to galvanize his support base, that they usually act in haste and do some sort of external enlargement. Basically, what that means is for President Xi to attack Taiwan.
Share that allows them to make those kinds of
Well, for Nvidia, China is a huge market, and China is a huge consumer of semiconductors. It's the world's second largest economy, and they have a growing and increasingly sophisticated tech sector that is demanding these kinds of chips, these kinds of products. And the challenge also is on the overall economic front, too. If the tariffs that the president has rolled out and threatens to continue to oppose on a sector-wide basis against pharmaceuticals and semiconductors, since we're talking about that right now, that does also create some economic risk that, we've heard so many people, including our own in-house economists, cite that, the tariffs do create a potential drag on the economy, and that is something also that would weigh on demand. And then likewise, a lot of these chip makers face the risk, even if they produce something here, of increased costs if we see those sector-wide tariffs on semiconductors and semiconductor manufacturing equipment imposed. And the reason why is that some of the world's leading makers of advanced semiconductor manufacturing gear, they are based overseas. It's Tokyo Electron, but even more importantly, ASML. They reported earnings today, gave a really...
It's contributing to the pressure we're seeing, for sure.
Contributing to the pressure that we're seeing. And that is something else that is weighing on chip makers and weighing on the market. And it is something that we're seeing play out today in real time.
Well, and it's an excellent point. Obviously, the Section 232 review, which takes national security risk into account when potentially setting levels of tariffs, has been opened for semiconductors. And we learned last night the president signed an executive action to open a Section 232 review of critical minerals as well. We know, though, Mike, that typically those reviews would take an extended period of time, like 270 days. Is that likely to be the case this time around?
Well, it's a great question, because I did the math on when the review would have started and when it's supposed to end. It's 2 days after Christmas. And it's unlikely that the president would wait that long. He wants to move fast on this. He wants to leave a mark. And he is a firm believer that tariffs are really a panacea when it comes to the economy. He does believe that it is effective in bringing that kind of manufacturing that he wants to see back home. He has cited repeatedly moves by companies. TSMC is one, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C is very important for your skin. for your immune system, and magnesium is very important for your immune system and your brain health. This is a great way to get healthy, help with your immune system, your skin, and your brain health. Taking magnesium also helps the efficacy of D3. You can get magnesium 3 different ways on my store. Taking the vitamin C plus magnesium, taking the magnesium and zinc, or the Boomer Boost has magnesium in it. So please go to my store, get the vitamin C and magnesium, boost up your immune system and your brain health. And this dual purpose product, olive leaf extract, helps with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and also helps to maintain and improve your lipid profile. All right, a good lipid profile basically means lower LDL levels, increased HDL levels. With improved lipid profile, you're reducing the chances of building a plaque. You bring down your inflammation, you're reducing the chances of building a plaque. When you're bringing down systemic inflammation, you're also helping with your immune system. So please go to my store, take the olive leaf extract every day. It's a great dual purpose product. And a good stack here would be to take the vitamin C plus magnesium and the olive leaf extract. Also get the magnesium and zinc. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the supplements, stack them the way I'm telling you to, and it's also a holistic approach. Proper diet, proper exercise, proper sleep, mindfulness, learning new things, being active, being positive. These are all holistic approaches to slowing down the aging process. So please go to my store, get the olive leaf extract, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Strategic Industries here in Washington. Thank you so much. As Mike alludes to the FTC case that is in court right now, I'm watching another development in the course as Judge Boasberg finds probable cause to hold administration officials in contempt of court for defying his order to turn around those planes bound for El Salvador that had alleged Venezuelan gang members on board. We're going to dig into this story next with immigration attorney David Leopold and Bloomberg's Nancy Cook. That's straight ahead here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
I definitely have an audio problem with Bloomberg. Something's wacky with Bloomberg. All right, let's go to maybe France 24 might have something good planned. Let's take a look. No, I'm talking about BS. All right, 9 hours ago, Putin headed for economic catastrophe. His oil price continues to drop. This is Times Radio, so let's take a look at that.
The lubricant that allows Russia to continue to fight the war, the oil price, because of these tariff wars, has dropped. It's dropped a good 15 to 20%. And we're now talking about around $51 per barrel for Urals, which is the Urals crude, which is the type of oil that Russia sells. And that's far below the level that Russia is comfortable operating at. And if these oil prices were to stay this low for long or go lower, we could end up seeing Russia going into a real economic catastrophe. And if they do that, then Putin is just less able to continue to execute the war the way he's been doing it.
But we're seeing Putin at the same time. We talked of the West's access to the U.S. defense industrial base. Russia's defense industrial base clearly isn't up to it. But what level of corruption is there still within that? And we're seeing Russia having to get closer to China, to North Korea, to Iran. And I saw recent estimates that up to 80% of Russia's artillery ammunition is coming from North Korea, proving that it can't sustain its own manufacturing. And we've got the reports of Chinese soldiers being captured in the front line. And in fact, in a press conference last night run by the Ukrainians, the 2 Chinese soldiers turned around and said that the Russians have tried to kill them with chemical weapons rather than let them be captured. These are all signs of desperation. Is Putin that desperate? And what do you think Xi Jinping will be getting out of this from Russia? What's the debt that's going to be there, the likelihood of him then having to call that in at some stage in the future?
Well, I would say that Russia is in a very desperate situation. If you look at the Ukrainian estimates, they've lost around 940,000 soldiers, either to death or disability, 11,000 tanks, 45,000 vehicles. I mean, not to mention $300 billion of foreign exchange reserves being frozen abroad and other terrible things from their perspective. And none of these things would be acceptable in any type of situation where the leader was accountable in any way. So Putin is an unaccountable leader. He's not worried about the people, the voters of Russia. He's not worried about the parliament. He's not worried about the press. He's not worried about the laws. He's totally unaccountable. And therefore, even though he's in a desperate situation and the losses that they've incurred are completely, in a democratic country, we couldn't have sustained 1/100th of their losses without people kicking out the leader. But he can carry on running his country into the ground for a lot longer, as long as he's able to keep his grip on power. And so far, he's been able to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some totally unexpected moment where it all comes undone. But we can't bank on that. We can't predict that. And we can't operate and make our plans on that basis, because that may never happen. Look at North Korea. The Kim family has been around for 3 generations. And so, sometimes dictators fall and sometimes they don't. As far as China is concerned, China's loving this. They're just licking their lips right now. They're getting cheap oil. The Russians have to sell them oil at a discount. They're getting markets that the Westerners have stopped selling into. You can't buy an iPhone in Moscow, and so the Chinese are selling their phones in and their cars and all this kind of stuff. And perhaps most of all, China, who is an enemy of democracy, is watching all these democracies having to dig deep into their pockets and expend valuable resources helping the Ukrainians. And the Chinese can just sit there and smile as the dictatorships, score a point and the democracies have to lose a point.
Do you think the Chinese are manipulating the Russians to try and create instability, to take focus away from what they're doing in Southeast Asia? And do you think China is actually, in the same way they have done through Africa, effectively buying big chunks of Russia, buying chunks of Russian natural resources, that if there is a collapse of the Russian Federation, China will then want to go and protect?
Well, it's only upside for China. The whole situation of Russia at war. If it doesn't go well for Russia, China can hoover up the pieces. If it goes well for Russia, it's a win for dictatorships. In the meantime, there's all sorts of money to be made. And just like with Africa, they don't have to expend any valuable resources of their own, and they end up with all sorts of influence that they're getting that we're not. And so this is definitely a win for China, except if Ukraine were to prevail. If Ukraine prevails, then it looks pretty terrible for China in their ambitions to take over Taiwan. And so, the only thing that they're scared about is the West cohesive enough so that it would respond robustly if they were to go after Taiwan. And so this is kind of a litmus test for the Chinese to see how we're behaving towards Ukraine. And of course, if the United States abandons Ukraine, that's a good sign for China going after Taiwan.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating, but surely there must be across Russia, with the different elements of the Federation, and with I don't know what you'd have as a slightly tongue-in-cheek collective noun for the oligarchs that are running the country. There must be something there, but they must be sitting very unhappy that their way of life that they used to know before sanctions came in, before this invasion of Ukraine, has now been destroyed completely. And their families must be putting pressure on them as well. And then you've got the leaders of the different elements of the Federation. They must be sitting going, well, Moscow is losing its grip. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to get greater autonomy. Are you picking up anything that is causing or would cause Putin that sort of angst?
Well, he's always scared of someone coming for him, and it's not so much grumbling, specific grumbling, but it's more the fact that whoever runs Russia, it becomes
richer than the king of Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's the money is so good that everybody wants that job. Everyone wants to take it away from him. Everyone wants those resources. And so the problem he has, and he's always had, is that it's a pretty profitable position to be in, to be the president of Russia. And Putin's probably the richest man in the world, and lots of other people would like to be the richest man in the world if they could be. And therefore, he's extremely paranoid, and he's rightly paranoid because there are people who want to take his job and his resources. And therefore, he's looking out in every possible way to either kill, imprison, or disappear anybody who's going to challenge him. And of course, we've seen lots of examples of that. There was Alexei Navalny, the famous opposition activist who was killed in February 2024 in prison. There was Boris Nemtsov. There was Yevgeny Prigozhin. And of course, there's probably hundreds of others whose names you don't recognize but were real threats to Putin. So any oligarch who's grumbling about not having enough money, he's grumbling to himself. Maybe not even grumbling to himself because they're so scared. These guys are so scared that at any point it could all be taken away and they could end up dying, that they're just keeping their nose clean, their head down, and just doing whatever they're told to do.
What's Trump's game and what's Putin's game in all of this?
Well, let's start with Putin. The reason why Putin started this war in the first place, and let's be clear, it was Putin that started the war. I don't think anyone debates that other than Donald Trump. The reason that Putin started this war is that he needed something in order to stay in power. Putin has been a kleptocrat dictator for 25 years. He's stolen an absolutely ungodly amount of money from the Russian people. I would say that he and the 1,000 people around him over 25 years have stolen $1 trillion from the Russian state. He's terrified that the Russian people at some point will rise up and say enough is enough. And if they rise up, there's no happy ending for Vladimir Putin. So as a dictator, he's taken the step that many dictators take when they're worried about their own people coming against them, which is he found a foreign enemy, he created a foreign enemy, and he started a war. And I should point out that there was actually no beef between the Russians and the Ukrainians before Putin manufactured it. He created a fake conflict. And as a result, this war has nothing to do with NATO. It has nothing to do with his grand vision of a Russian empire. This is purely a little man who's stolen too much money, who wants to stay in power. And so his game plan is to be at war. He needs this war to stay in power. And therefore, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump or anyone else were to offer him. Donald Trump can offer him the 5 oblasts and no NATO and all of this kind of stuff, and it wouldn't make any difference. Not that anyone should offer Putin anything. And therefore, the situation we're in right now is Putin not having altered for 1 minute his objectives in 1 centimeter from when he started this whole thing. And then we also have this crazy American leader who's made all these promises that he can't keep, and he just keeps on repeating over and over again nonsense in order to try to look like he's the deal maker that's going to solve this whole problem.
Thank you for watching another episode of Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you want more great content, please sign up for Times Radio membership, and then you can leave.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Structural Nano Silver toothpaste. This Structural Nano Silver toothpaste has no fluoride. You know why? Because fluoride makes you stupid. And this will help to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with your gum line, reduce the inflammation, and with good oral hygiene, you're helping with your vascular system and your valvular system. So please go to my store and get the Structural Nano Silver toothpaste. Get a few tubes of this for your household. It's very high quality. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. All right? Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. If you purchase $150 worth of product or more on my store, you will get a free gift until supplies last. Also, get the Structural Nano Silver Gel. It's a dual purpose product. You're going to apply it on your skin every day. This is skincare. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put the Structural Nano Silver Gel on your abrasion and it'll heal your wound. It'll heal quicker. If you're not feeling well or or someone around you is not feeling well, put this on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. A lot of people use this during, the problem that we had, last 5 years. It's really important to have this around. Make sure you have it at home and at work, because you never know when you need it. All right? Trust me on this. So please go to my store, get the great products that I offer, help support my work. I do these videos for free. All right? I have thousands of videos for free. You learn a lot of stuff. But I also have great products that I use that actually help with your health and wellness. So please take a look, get some products, get healthy. Follow that holistic approach that I have. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's go back to Bloomberg.
30 or his life if he was sent back to El Salvador. So for them to now come out and use this increasingly hostile and hateful rhetoric, going from we made a mistake to now he's a terrorist, is absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. So if he's brought back to the United States, he would be restored to the status that he was in. And that's as a lawfully present non-citizen in the United States under what we call withholding of removal because he faces a loss of liberty or life in El Salvador. That's why this part of it, the whole thing is horrible, but that makes it particularly horrible.
Well, and that is just the case of this one man who was on planes that were full of hundreds of people who were deported and sent to this prison. And of course, the very nature of whether or not those planes ultimately should have landed in El Salvador was a question in the case being overseen by Judge Boasberg, who today said he sees reason to hold administration officials in contempt for violating his verbal order to turn the planes around. I feel free to weigh in on whether that contempt kind of proceeding will change anything here, but what about due process for those individuals who are on board those aircraft?
What about due process? I mean, the fairness of this, there is no fairness. Due process really means fairness. It means an opportunity to present yourself to a court. It means an opportunity to tell the government, no, you know what, I'm not supposed to be part of this, and here's why. And nobody who was sent, the people that were sent to El Salvador, to the Sikat prison, the notoriously brutal prison run by the two-bit dictator Bukele from El Salvador, those folks, they didn't get any chance to defend themselves. Whether we see that mistakes were made, whether it was the barber or whether it was the women who were sent down there, we see that mistakes were made and we see that mistakes can be corrected. What's going on here is that the government, the Trump administration, is doubling down and does not want to follow the courts in open defiance of the United States Supreme Court, playing with words like effectuate. So we all know what that means. It means get him home, for God's sake. That's what the district court said, and that's what the Supreme Court affirmed. And you think of this horrible rhetoric that's coming out of the Oval Office about him being a terrorist, and remind people that you can lie in the Oval Office, but you can't lie in a courtroom. And so you don't hear that same rhetoric from the DOJ, the Department of Justice attorneys who are arguing these cases. They're hemming and hawing for sure, but they all have ethical duties to present good faith arguments to the court, and you're not hearing that hateful rhetoric, those name calling and that sort of thing from the attorneys.
David, we just have 30 seconds left, but if any of those attorneys or others were to be held in contempt of court, is there anything President Trump can do to interfere in that?
Well, there's certainly, I would hope not. I would hope that the president would respect the rule of law. I mean, clearly we've seen indications that is not to be expected with the pardon of the January 6th insurrection.
Good point. David Leopold, immigration attorney here on Balance of Power. Thank you for joining Bloomberg.
Yeah, they definitely had something wrong with their audio for some reason. I don't know why. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. The nattokinase is fibrinolytic. It's going to break up clots. It's going to help with your lipid profile. It's going to help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Lower LDL levels will reduce the chances of building up plaque. Also, things that will help to reduce plaque buildup is making sure you soak up free radicals in your bloodstream and reducing inflammation. So please go to my store and get the nattokinase. Another great stack is the D3 and the vitamin K2, MK7. It's a dual purpose. They'll help with increasing your bone density, but also help with your cardiovascular, especially when you stack it with the nattokinase for the cardiovascular stack. So let's talk about building up more bone density. When you get older, you become less active, and not only that, you produce more osteoclasts versus osteoblasts. You need osteoblasts to make bone matrix, but when you get older, you actually produce more osteoclasts, and they eat bone matrix, all right? So when someone gets older, your bone density starts to decline, and your body, your bones are regenerating and kind of recycling every 7 years or so. So every 7 years, 5 to 7 years, you're like losing bone density, all right? You're becoming less active. The different minerals that you need for bone matrix start to deplete. Hormonal changes, especially for women. And what happens is you start to lose bone density rapidly. So once you hit about age 40, it's important to really build up that bone density. You do that by taking the proper supplementation and doing the proper working out. Now for bone density, what you want to do is take D3 and the K2 MK7 molecule, right? They stack them together. The efficacy of D3 improves when you have magnesium in your diet. So I have 3 different ways that you can get magnesium in your diet. Magnesium and zinc supplement, the vitamin C and magnesium, and the Boomer Boost, all right? So take the D3 and the K2 and the magnesium, take calcium or drink milk, and do these exercises I'm going to show you. All right, you want to lift weights, all right? So you have just a holistic weightlifting routine for your whole body, but you also want to do every day, do these calf lifts, all right? And what you do is you just, with no shoes on, all right, preferably on a hard floor, you lift up your body, okay? So you do these calf lifts, and you do that 50 times, and you come down onto the hard floor with your heel to feel that vibration up through your legs, into your hip, and up through your spine. That's really important, okay? And you do 50 of those, all right, at about this pace, all right? You do that every day, all right? And what you're doing is you're providing a vibration. Not only are you building your calf muscle and helping with your venous return to your heart, but you're also in creating a musculature for your calf. But you're also sending a vibration signal to activate a microenvironment to deposit more bone matrix. Right? So you're lifting weights, and to be able to support that weightlifting, your bones are getting stressed, and it's creating a micro environment, and it's going to deposit new bone matrix. But also vibration it speeds up the process. So you want to do about 50 of these calf lifts, all right? Get that vibration in your leg, into your femur, into the neck of the femur, into your hip, and that's going to strengthen the femur, all right? Especially the neck of the femur, and the head of the femur, but also up through your spine. And what will happen is that your bones will actually get more dense over time, all right? Now, it's also important, and a lot of people don't realize this, by doing this weight training and building up muscle, you should build up muscle in your legs, your arms, your torso, but also your back muscles. This is an underdeveloped area that most people don't really target when they're in the gym. You target those muscles in the back, and you're going to have better musculature for the posture, and it supports your spinal column, all right, your vertebrae. And when you have better posture, three things are going to happen. One, you're going to be able to have better blood flow, because if you're crouched down, you're older and you're crouching down, right? You're impeding the blood flow. So you're improving blood flow, you're improving your lymphatic system to allow it to flow, and you're also improving your the skeletal muscle structure of your spinal column. If you look at people that are getting older and they are starting to atrophy and they're losing bone density, they start to shrink and they start to hunch over. And the more they hunch over, actually, it causes more problems, all right? It causes problems with the blood flow and the lymphatic system, right? And also the bone density. You want that good back muscle posture. So work out those back muscles. It's really important when you get older. When you're younger, you already have them naturally, but over time you lose it, right? So it's really important to work those back muscles. So that's a holistic approach to improving your bone density and improving your blood flow and your lymphatic flow. So get the vitamin K2, MK7 molecule on my store, get the nattokinase and the D3. It's a great stack for cardiovascular health, but the D3, the K2 with the resistance training and that vibration that I was telling you about to improve your bone density. Extremely important once you turn 40 years of age. Now, I just told you something that's really important, that's going to help with your health, that a lot of people don't know. So please go to my store, help support this free information I'm giving you. Help support by getting the products that I have. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. It's all caps, discount 5, $5 off. If you purchase $150 or more on my store, you get a free gift until supplies last. And that way you're supporting your health and you're supporting this free work that I'm doing to inform the public about their health and wellness. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get healthy. You can do it. It is in your power to get healthy. All right? I'm here to help. So please help me help you. Go to my store and get the products and follow this holistic approach. All right, so I have a question that I haven't read on the chat here. All right, I'll address that question after this video here.
But do you really believe that after running trade deficits since the 1970s, we woke up on April 2nd to an emergency that required him to do this, and it wasn't targeted on 1 or 2 or 10 countries, but rather we had an emergency with the entire world all of a sudden on April 2nd? It is preposterous. And so I think California does have a road here, and I think we're going to see this is the third suit, the first by a state. I think others are going to follow.
But we know the courts can only move so quickly, Rick, and there's only so much respect one could argue that the administration has for a court ruling, depending on what it is, given what we've seen in other cases. Knowing that trade deals are being negotiated now, tariffs are already implemented in place. I mean, this policy could already have been largely set and the economy already feeling the effects before any court of law ultimately comes down with an actual verdict.
Yeah, I think that certainly in the case of California, they've already been impacted by the tariffs that are going on today, and can only be probably have worse impact as these deals get done, because the deals aren't likely to make the tariffs all disappear. Maybe they come down a bit, but the number one tariff that has got sort of California melting down is with China, and that hasn't come down 140%. So at the end of the day, California is going to be affected as if it was a separate country. I mean, it's the 5th largest economy in the world, and they are connected to a global supply chain for everything from technology to food. And so it doesn't surprise me that Newsom has used this. He's been looking for a political ploy to engage Trump for quite some time. He's been trying to brandish his more, I would say, diverse political views by going on shows like Joe Rogan and others. So, now he's going to go head to head. And my guess is it'll happen pretty quickly because they're filing this case in the Northern District of California, and that should give them an immediate hearing, at which point in time, it's kind of hard not to say that California is being adversely impacted, and that there are questions about whether or not Donald Trump has the authority in the Constitution and the laws of our land to be able to make this kind of policy.
Well, if you see justification, Rick, for Newsom being the one to take on this charge, does this make him, or was he already, the most prominent foil to President Trump in American politics right now?
Well, I think immediately after the election, people were kind of scratching their head wondering what's he doing, because he was sort of carousing around with a bunch of conservative leaders, not necessarily partisan conservatives, but certainly, in the case of Joe Rogan, ideologically conservative, or at least consistent with Donald Trump. And I think Democrats alike were, sounding off, saying, what in the world is he up to, right? He's, left of center, a political leader in the largest economy in America. And, they felt, I think, Democrats, you'd have to ask Jeannie, but I think they left them scratching their head going, what's the guy up to? Now that he looks like he could become the foil to Donald Trump on what would be considered a #1 issue in America today, and also, conversely, converting this into I'm fighting for your economy, the one that's employing you, the one that's financing you, the one that's creating a future for you. It's a pretty important political move on the part of the governor, and I think one that could pay real great dividends regardless of whether the court rules for him or against him.
Well, I will ask Jeannie about this, Rick. Thank you. Especially, Jeannie, as this comes as we're seeing new survey data out from Politico today that was a dual survey of California voters and then political professionals who are driving the agenda of California specifically, which finds that there's a bit of a gap here. Most voters skeptical of things like legal immigration. Less than half think the state should be able to set its own standards on vehicle emissions, which obviously is something that Newsom has been focused on. Is there a disconnect between the fight Newsom is trying to fight and the fight actually voters want him to?
On some issues there has been, and this is a fascinating poll. I have a lot of questions about this poll methodologically. I give them a lot of credit for this split sample. I'm not sure about the influential, but leaving that aside, the finding that the influencers are more homogeneous than the average mass public, that's to be expected. And I think on this fight in particular, though, Gavin Newsom, the Attorney General, it would be absolutely an abomination if they didn't pursue this lawsuit. As Rick just talked about, this is costing the state billions of dollars. The harm is very real. So this is something that I think the public will support because it has to do with their costs as they go to the grocery store, all of our costs every day.
Let me get this straight. If you're a consumer, let me get this straight. If you're a consumer, you should just sell your country down the river so you can buy cheap goods. That's what she's saying. Take the pain, make the country better, build up the economic clustering, and the society will be better off in the long run. If we keep on going down this road, if we stay with the status quo, what we will see is that the future generation will not have the skill set and the leadership mentoring when they get those first jobs and build families and build household and be able to purchase a first home. You're starting to see that problem already with millennials. Their first job sucks. And not only that, they're having a hard time finding that first job after college or after high school. So when you're not having family formation, if you're not building equity in your life in your 20s. You're going to have problems in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. All right? So that's not a vibrant economy. How can we keep the status quo? Oh, so California can keep on, making money, but sell the other 49 states down the river. No. California can take the hit.
Look, and whether there's enough there to warrant a potential win in a state like New York, it's too soon to tell. But I would say the clouds that are overcast on this election are going to be that we're heading into a midterm election that's generally not good to the party in power, Republicans. And every indication that I've seen,
the midterm is in 2026, in November. That's a long ways away. And it's very possible that we're going to see an all-time S&P 500 price at the end of the year and into 2026. So this totally could change. You think the Democratic Party is going to win if the S&P 500 is at the all-time high? No, I don't think so.
Senator Stefanik?
There absolutely could be. And what I would love, Kaylee, is I would love a Kathy Hochul versus Elise Stefanik, 2 women at the top of the ticket. I would love to see that. Stefanik has some competition. There's somebody you just interviewed, I know not that long ago, Representative Waller. He's said to be a contender. Also Bruce Blakeman, from Nassau County. So Republicans have some very good up-and-coming young contenders there. And of course, Kathy Hochul, as the incumbent governor, she has experienced some problems. So I do think there may be an opening. I think it's going to be a tough year as these races at the local level and state level are so nationalized. And people are fed up in many ways in New York with what is happening in Washington. We may see some pushback, but I think Stefanik, I think she's got a really good chance. And hey, she could stay in New York and not have to be at the UN, but be in Albany.
Well, fair enough. As we consider the issues that will matter ultimately when voters are making these decisions, the Democrats are trying to make a big one of Social Security and using an interesting messenger in particular yesterday as we saw the return of former President Joe Biden, his first speech since leaving office. Here's a taste of it.
Fewer than 100 days, this new administration has made done so much damage and so much destruction. It's kind of breathtaking what could happen in this year. They've taken enhancements to the Social Security Administration.
Jeannie, we just have 90 seconds left here, but I wonder what you made of Biden's big return last night and him as a messenger for this party.
It is the right message, the wrong messenger. You used exactly the right word. He got some pushback. You know it was the wrong messenger because Donald Trump was out in full force posting videos and talking about, Sleepy Joe again. He had some unfortunate language. Somebody said Joe Biden should stay in retirement. I think that is the lesson. His message is right, imminent threat to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, but he has to be in retirement, and we need our more younger, vibrant, and upcoming future-looking messengers out there for the Democrats.
Rick, 30 seconds. Do Democrats want Joe Biden to stay out of the spotlight leading up to 2026?
I think not only do they want him in retirement, but they want him in a retirement home. I mean, this was really the biggest non-event of the year, and this concept of not using the president's name. I mean, he takes Marcus of Queensberry's rules to a knife fight, and it's just so yesterday. I think that it sets the Democrats back quite a bit.
Yeah, not President Trump mentioned, just this guy repeatedly. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, our political panel, thank you so much. They'll, of course, be back for more in the next hour of Balance of Power, which is coming up on both Bloomberg TV and radio, as we have to shift the focus back to China. The trade talks that have yet to start. China has some conditions, but also export curbs that have come to light today when it comes to some U.S. chip makers like Nvidia. That stock is down 7.5% right now. AMD also facing some new export curbs. It's down another 7% too. All of that dragging on tech stocks, and we'll get the latest on that coming up shortly, as we also await remarks from the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, in the next hour. So stick with us here
under them.
And you still got that audio problem. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the NAD Plus supplement. This boosts up your NAD Plus levels. That's very important for boosting up your energy, also helping to heal your DNA damage. As you get older, you start to accumulate DNA damage. Now, we have processes within our cell to help repair that. But when you get older, it's harder to repair. You get DNA damage at the cellular level, but also at the mitochondrial level. This will help to repair the DNA damage for the cellular DNA and the mitochondrial DNA. NAD Plus also helps to protect your neurons. That's extremely important once you hit age 40. So start taking NAD Plus supplement now, all right? Protect those neurons, extremely important. The earlier the better to protect neurons. Ubiquinol, the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can buy. You can't buy anything better than this. Now, ubiquinol will help to soak up free radicals, so it's going to reduce stress in the cell. It's going to also help with the mitochondrial health. Your ATP is going to go up, so your energy levels are going to go up. And ubiquinol helps to protect neurons. So stacking NAD Plus supplement with the ubiquinol is a great way to protect neurons. So please go to my store, get the NAD Plus, the ubiquinol, take it every day, protect those neurons. Super important. Stacks really well with C60 and resveratrol. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please help support my work and follow the protocol. If you follow the protocol, you're going to get healthy. You're going to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. All right, let's go to live now here.
Contempt for violating his orders in mid-March, halting the use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members. Of course, we're following this very closely. We'll have people discussing this. Former federal prosecutor joining us in just a little bit about this. This is the post from the Associated Press saying a judge finds cause to hold the Trump administration officials in contempt for ignoring that order on deportation flights. So we'll get to that and what it means moving forward, as the Trump administration, Caroline Leavitt at the White House yesterday saying that they are complying with all the rules from the Supreme Court, most recently that unanimous 9-0 decision saying that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A very different story entirely. But we're going to continue to follow that. I do want to give you some more updates that we're watching over the next couple of hours, including the stock market. A live look right now, down some 257 points. We'll have more information about that coming up in a little bit, as Fed Chair Jerome Powell is expected to make some remarks at the Economic Club of Chicago. We'll see what he has to say and how that moves the market. We're also watching this here on Live Now from Fox out of California, as Governor Newsom expected to announce a lawsuit against President Trump and the administration over the tariffs levied against China. So that is some big news. That's coming in about half an hour or so. So we'll take you out to this, as Governor Newsom, according to the New York Post, a post there saying they're suing Trump over quote unquote unlawful tariff. So that's coming up here in just the next hour or so. A busy day here on Live Now from Fox. We'll take you out to another live event that we're just dipping into right now out of the Texas State House, as they are discussing and soon to be voting on school vouchers, public school funding, different bills today. Let's listen in to this live event on Live Now.
The amount here, let me find it exactly for you. It's $260 million.
$260 million, but it grows over time?
Yes, stair step in the first 2 years.
Okay. And the
Texas State House expected to vote on school vouchers. All right, let me, I want to talk about another stat here before we go to Bloomberg. Myotrol, extremely important. When we get older, once we hit age 40, unfortunately, we start to atrophy. And it's really important to build up muscle and maintain muscle and reduce that atrophy. So Myotrol helps with that. Reduce that atrophy, build up that muscle, maintain that muscle. Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. Take it every day, do resistance training, and build that muscle. Remember what I said, build those back muscles, really important for your health, all right? Now, Myotrol has flavonoids, lignans, and polyphenols, and they are the cofactors that you need to help with gene expression. So take Myotrol every day. This also helps with the mitochondrial health, and because of the lignans, it'll bring down inflammation. Really important. You'll actually recover quicker after your workout. This is great to take if you're age 40 or older and you do the resistance training. It also helps if you are an athlete, younger or older, to help build muscle and strength for your sport. So this is a dual purpose product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Also get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will get rid of that brain fog and help support your memory. By having those neurons firing, you're going to be able to think better, you're going to have better memory, you're going to actually sleep better, you're going to be able to concentrate. So please go to my store, get the Clarity Factor. This is great if you're in school, if you're at work and you have high cognitive function type activities, or even if you are retired and you need a little bit of help with the memory and get rid of the brain fog. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Clarity Factor, get those neurons firing, and then you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. More neuron connections, the better off you are. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Clarity Factor. Stacks really well with Myotrol. This stack right here is helping with your brain health and also your musculature. So please go to my store. Approach this problem of aging, right, by taking the proper supplements, stacking them the right way, and having the holistic approach. And that is proper diet, proper exercise, filter water, stay away from processed foods, get proper sleep, talk to people, learn new things, read, write, do different exercises, cardio, resistance training, balancing, and stretching exercises. All of them are important. Mindfulness or spirituality. And when you have this more holistic approach, you're going to get healthy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It is in your power to reduce a lot of the chronic illnesses that we have in the United States. So please help support my work by getting the products that I offer. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more on any order, you will get a free gift until supplies last.
Of a write down. That's literally basically the loss of being unable to sell inventory that was already committed to customers is a pain, but for AMD, even though their dollar sales is much less than Nvidia, proportionately China is so important. And the context you need to remember is these are American companies. They are the biggest technology companies in the world. Nvidia literally the biggest player in AI markets. And there was a time where China was the most important end market for cloud computing. Nvidia's already moved away. 2022, China was about 25, 26% of revenue. It's now low double digits, and most people say going single digits. But this is the trade-off the administration needs to work with these companies on. They want to onshore them in the US, but need to consider the end markets they're now being cut off from.
Well, yeah, and how that may impact these companies' ability to invest in things like a greater capacity in the United States. Are we to assume, Ed, that actually getting licenses to continue exporting these chips is completely out of the question?
Well, I had the opportunity this morning to ask the president's advisor and director of the Office for Science and Technology Policy, Michael Kratsios, and he declined to answer. And the audience can read into that what they will. It was a very specific question. Will you advise the president to allow AMD and Nvidia to have a license? The point is that these chips are much lower performance than the leading edge product that both of them produce. The concern and anxiety from the White House is that they're still capable of going into an AI supercomputer, and that from a national security perspective, China could use that lower level technology for the things it's concerned about. But again, he declined to comment. It's going to be really interesting to see how they play it. My question to your panel throughout the week and the shows is what happens next, right? Because the thing we haven't talked about is which Chinese companies were buying those chips. Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance. I'd be really curious if America thinks about something called an entity list and goes much more specific on how it prevents the transfer of technology.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions about how much further this could snowball. And to your point about this being kind of a lower capability chip than others, are there still further rungs on the ladder that the administration could decide to go down and restrict exports when it comes to what Nvidia and AMD make?
Yeah, an entity list is interesting because you basically say, okay, American companies, you cannot sell to these specific Chinese companies. We've listed them for you, but those are the biggest customers. There's another way of thinking about this. You know the expression, it takes two to tango. And in a trade or tariffs or restrictions environment, think about it from China's perspective. Huawei is becoming their national champion of cutting-edge technology. They have a similar chip that does what Nvidia and AMD's lower-level chips can do. But those Chinese companies wanted to use the American technology. There is an argument made by some on my show earlier today, Denny Fish, who has billions of dollars of those stocks, that all America is doing inadvertently or indirectly is allowing China to move forward with onshoring and elevating its own domestic industry. So that's a very interesting thing, right? You're cutting off sales of your main American technology companies on the hope that they shift activity to the US and that they have other customers outside of China.
All right. Ed Ludlow, co-host of Bloomberg Technology, thank you so much. And we want to keep the focus on China, and specifically the prospect of trade negotiations opening up between Washington and Beijing, as we learned today some details about what China might be asking for before they're willing to go to the table. And it's to Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, who is live at the White House, that we turn to for those details. So Tyler, obviously there's a number of things here based on our reporting. How likely is the administration to acquiesce to what China wants?
Yeah, hey, Kelly. Well, that really remains to be seen, considering that one of the big points here that we're learning per a person familiar with the Chinese government's thinking is that Beijing would like to see a point person appointed to lead these talks other than President Trump. And we know that this White House has repeatedly said that he would be directly involved, and even the president himself has said that he is waiting for Xi Jinping's call. Still, this is kind of our first insight that we've really seen into potentially what could break what has been weeks of escalation between the two countries. Also importantly, the source familiar telling Bloomberg News that the most important precondition is going to be for Chinese officials to feel that they are treated with respect. It appears that Beijing would like to see President Trump start to disavow when his cabinet members, for example, criticize China, even if President Trump himself says that he has a good relationship with Xi Jinping. So far, we have to see where this goes, because we do know that the White House would like China to ultimately reach out directly. And we should say that that tactic has helped expedite negotiations in some cases. Take today, for example, Japan is here with negotiators in Washington, and Japan was one of those countries that did reach out directly to President Trump with a phone call between the Prime Minister and the White House. And officials have repeatedly pointed us to the fact that Japan would get priority status because they felt that they reached out very quickly to negotiate. And while we talk about who is talking and who's not talking, we have to always keep in mind, of course, Japan, but also those other countries like South Korea and Vietnam, geographically close to China, that this White House seems to be prioritizing in calls as Xi Jinping completes his own tour of Southeast Asia countries as he tries to talk to those leaders directly to shore up his support.
Yeah, and Bloomberg has some fresh reporting out today, Tyler, about how the administration may be asking countries like Japan to be considering putting their own tariffs on China as part of these negotiations. What other asks could the Japanese who are in Washington today face from the administration?
Right, and that reporting is particularly interesting because Bloomberg News had actually reported that a few months ago. Remember when those Mexico tariff talks were underway, that the U.S. had been pressuring Mexico to lift its own tariffs against China. So this does appear to be a repeat of a potential strategy here by the administration, as we've heard Scott Bessent, for example, say that he would like to see a coalition form together, and then they could tackle ultimately what happens there with China. Remains to be seen exactly what's going to be put on the table when it comes to these talks with Japan. President Trump, of course, saying in his Truth Social post that they'll be talking about trade imbalances as well as American military support. As you well know, all of these talks are going well beyond just those tariff barriers. We could keep in mind that Japan has already pledged, for example, that it would boost U.S. LNG imports into the country, so perhaps that could be one of the factors here on the table as we wait to learn more. But one thing that we do know, Kaylee, President Trump says he's going to be directly involved in these talks today, even though they're not at the leader level. He's going to appear alongside his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall live at the White House here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thank you so much for your reporting. And now we get analysis from our political panel, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, both of them Bloomberg Politics contributors. Rick, also Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeannie, Democratic analyst and senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. Rick, when we consider these negotiations that are now beginning, knowing that there is a 90-day window that is getting ever shorter that the administration has left for itself here to ink all of these various trade deals, how important is it for them to have quick victories, quick deals to announce?
Right now, the S&P 500 is trading at about 1.3, almost 1.4% down right now.
That would make some sense, but I think really this is a much bigger thing, and I think your conversation with Tyler kind of kicks it off, and that is, this is about isolating China, right? You'll notice everybody else got a reprieve but them. This has been a real focus of Donald Trump since his first presidency, is to basically divide the world along the lines of their friends with China and their friends of the United States. And we haven't seen this kind of alignment since the Soviet Union, sphere of influence strategies that the U.S. used to have to go through during the Cold War. And so at the end of the day, I think what you see is this decoupling. You see trying to isolate China. You see the use of the military in the Pacific. You see the use of diplomacy abroad. You see the use of economics at home and abroad. And I think these are all the toolkits that Trump's using to try and basically create a deterrent to Chinese influence around the world.
Well, but he still says he wants China to pick up the phone and call. He'd like to make a deal, is the contention of him and others in the White House. Jeannie, and Tyler was just outlining some of the things China, according to our reporting, wants to see first. Guarantees that they'll be respected, there will be one point person, that there will be consistency in U.S. policy. Do you see those things as likely to be delivered by the Trump administration?
We haven't seen a sign of it yet. You know, Donald Trump has famously described himself as a great deal maker, and yet on the very issues he needs to make deals so far in the last 80 days, he has fallen short. Now, granted, we have to give him some time. But, you know, as I'm listening to Rick, I'm thinking that may have all been true for Donald Trump 1.0, but in Donald Trump 2.0, if we are trying to decouple from China, if we are trying to isolate China, we are doing a heck of a job doing that. Why the tariffs on every country in the world? Why start with Canada and Mexico? Why drive so many of our allies to seek relationships with China? Why is Xi Jinping traveling around the world?
Jeannie, because China was using Mexico and Canada as a conduit to get around import barriers.
Enough to get where we need to go, and we do need to get there, but this is not the way. And so now Donald Trump is caught up in trying to negotiate with every country around the world, as opposed to focusing like a laser beam where we should be focused, which is on China.
Well, he obviously was not shy about talking about China on the campaign trail, which is how we got to Trump 2.0, Rick, is in part because he campaigned on this, but he also campaigned on just the idea that he thinks tariffs are the way to revive the American manufacturing economy and make the U.S. greater than it was before. Can we quantify the actual domestic support for any of these policies, whether it comes to China or the wider tariff regime that is in place?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're right. It's not just a weapon or a tool of diplomacy and foreign relations. It's a way, in Donald Trump's mind, that you take off pressures from taxation on the American public and allow the world to fund our country and our government. And so he hasn't really invested too heavily in selling that. Obviously, it was a big part of his campaign. But you'll notice that most of the tariff discussion has not been as a way of avoiding taxing our citizens in his rhetoric up until this point in time. And I would say, without that, the American public is basically seeing, and we're seeing it in the consumer surveys and the polling, that they don't like it very much. It's destabilizing the economy. They are.
Maybe you should also talk to people that actually make stuff, the producers, not just the consumers. The consumer survey. What about the producer survey? See, the problem with the last 35 years of globalization and NAFTA and all this fast track for China, for the World Trade Organization, we hemorrhaged our economic cluster. Rick Davis. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support my work and get the products that I offer that will help to support your health. Stack them the way I tell you to stack them. These are the ways I stack them for my health, and you will benefit. Get the resveratrol. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. Resveratrol is an antioxidant, so it's going to soak up free radicals, reduce less stress in the cell, help with the health of the mitochondria. More ATP means more energy for your cell. You'll have youthful gene expression with resveratrol. You're going to get rid of cells that are in senescence. You're going to get rid of cells that are clogged up with a bunch of garbage called lipofuscin. And guess what? Your tissues will start to perform better. This stacks really well with C60, NAD+, and ubiquinol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take resveratrol every day. Now, let's talk about C60 for a second. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. I've been taking C60. I think I started taking C60 in 2016. All right? You're going to get lots of benefits from this. How it works is that it soaks up free radicals, boosts up your energy levels, helps with the mitochondrial health, and reduces stress in the cell. And when you're soaking up free radicals, you're reducing the stress, you're slowing down the aging process at the cellular level and at the tissue level. That means your organs are going to perform better. That means your immune system is going to perform better. That means your glands, your endocrine system is going to perform better, even your neurons. Because your neurons, you need lots of ATP. You need lots of mitochondria to produce those neurotransmitters and to shoot them off. So by having healthy mitochondria in your neurons are going to be healthier. You're going to have positive neuroplasticity. Your brain function is going to be better. You're going to have those neurons firing those neurotransmitters. You're going to be thinking faster. You're going to have less problems with memory. And what's going to happen is that you're going to be sleeping better, and you're going to have more vitality. You're thinking better. You have more energy. Your organ systems are performing better. And when you're soaking up free radicals, even at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. So it's helping with your cardiovascular. So there's huge benefits to this. Now, what I noticed after taking it for about 2.5 months, I no longer needed to use my glasses. I used to have glasses since I was 20 years old. All right. Once I was doing CAD, right, computer aided design, I needed to wear glasses. I was farsighted with astigmatism. So after about 2.5 months of taking this teaspoon a day, I no longer needed the glasses. Now you'll notice other things with your body improving when you take C60. We're all a little bit different. We all have our own different biochemistry and different ailments or whatever. Take C60, and what you're going to notice is that you're going to be soaking up those free radicals and your body's performing better. And over a year period, you're going to notice a substantial difference in your aging. You're going to look in the mirror 1 year later and you're going to look younger. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. It needs to be in an oil because it's lipid soluble. So C60 is a 60 carbon molecule that looks like a soccer ball. It's called fullerene. It's a very strong molecule. All right. And what it does is it soaks up free radicals hundreds of times stronger than C60, almost 1,000 times stronger than C60, or vitamin C, I'm sorry. So C60 will soak up free radicals because that 60 carbon molecule has valence electrons that are floating around and they orbit and they're orbiting, and it's able to soak up and neutralize the free radicals. When you compare it to vitamin C, which is one molecule of C60 and one molecule of vitamin C, C60 is going to be hundreds of times, if not 1,000 times, more potent than vitamin C. And the reason why is that once the free radical is neutralized by the vitamin C molecule, it can't neutralize any additional free radicals, while C60 can neutralize additional free radicals. One molecule. That's why it's so potent. All right. So take a teaspoon a day, every day. Now, by taking a teaspoon a day for best absorption, you want to take it on an empty stomach. If you work out, take it before your workout, and you'll notice that you recover quicker and you're soaking up the free radicals that you are producing during your workout. So you're actually healing your body as your body's working out at the same time. Okay. Now, C60, again, teaspoon a day, every day. You can get it in avocado oil, MCT coconut oil, or extra virgin olive oil. It is important to take it with a lipid, with an oil, for best absorption. All right. So please pay attention. This is an extremely important pillar for the protocol. Max 3 Fat 5 and Max 14 and cleanse for the first pillar to boost up your immune system. The second pillar, C60, soak up those free radicals. It's extremely potent. The turmeric, the ashwagandha, the lignans, that's going to bring down inflammation and boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost to boost up your energy levels and rev up your metabolism. C60 should be a part of this protocol, that health stack, however you customize it. It's really important to have in your stack because it's taking a strong antioxidant is a key pillar to this slowing down the aging process, boosting up your energy levels, and by slowing down that aging process, you're boosting up your immune system too. All right. A lot of people don't realize some of the things that are correlated to aging are lower ATP levels, weakening of your immune system, weakening of your mitochondria, more DNA damage. Neuroplasticity starts to go in the negative and it starts to recede. Your endocrine system isn't performing as well. Your gut biome starts to be disrupted. So all these things start to happen when you start to age, but you can reverse it if you target each one of these issues. And I just told you through this broadcast exactly what to do. All right. And what will happen is you're slowing down the aging process and you will have more vitality. So the years that you do have, you're going to spend them with more robustness. And when you're in your geriatric years, you're going to just be healthier. Most of the chronic diseases in the United States are preventable. They're self-induced. So you can lower your healthcare costs. You can lower the healthcare costs at the societal level if everyone just got healthier. You could bring down diabetes. You can bring down heart disease. Those are the two biggest killers in the United States. You can reduce mortality from diseases like cancer by doing screenings. Screenings are the best way to fight cancer. There's no other way. That's the best way. That's proven. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the stacks. Apply this holistic approach. Take charge of your life. Take a look at your biometrics. Get blood work. Get your screenings. Make sure you get the colonoscopies. If you're a female, make sure that you have your cancer screenings. Cervix, breast. All right, really important. All right, when you take charge of your health, you will be healthy. But if you think that you're just gonna, outsource it to the healthcare professions, the healthcare professionals, and your health insurance, they don't care. Trust me, they don't care. The only one that's going to care about your health is you. So take charge of it.
Questions at various news conferences and events, Betsy. But the thing that often the people asking those questions are really trying to get at is an understanding of the Fed's willingness to intervene, not just in any financial market like plumbing disruptions that we see, but actually economic disruptions we see as a result of tariffs. His message consistently is there's not a clarity on that tariff policy, therefore we don't have the certainty to kind of forecast any move. But I wonder if that means that inherently the Fed's going to end up acting too late, if they have to wait for the actual data to be in hand before doing anything, knowing monetary policy operates with a lag anyway. Do you think they could end up showing up too late to the ballgame?
Well, it's not just waiting for data. They're actually waiting for information. None of us really know exactly what's going to happen, how long these tariffs are going to last. When it comes to, an economic slowdown that is driven by tariffs, the Fed's in a difficult position because you're going to get a jump up in prices, so the price level will increase, and we'll see the economy slow down. I think if you look at what the Fed was thinking,
if prices go up and it's items that you really don't need, so they're elastic, you're going to have demand destruction and the prices are going to go down. That's just basic economics. Now, if there are goods that are rising in price that are inelastic, with an inelastic demand, then it's going to be sticky. But I'm really sure that in the long run, America will be better off. But they want you to think that it's all about the consumer and not the producer. Because you're used to buying cheap shit at Walmart.
Well, but they're not going to keep going up? Or do we start to behave in a way that shows that our inflation expectations have become unanchored? I think what they need to do is focus on the real economy, and that is where I think that they've indicated where their focus currently is.
Well, and to that point on the real economy and also the expectations of consumers, Betsy, it does seem that the expectation tariffs were going to kick in and raise prices on things like cars was the driving force behind the March retail sales data we got today. Biggest jump in 2 years. In large part, you look at autos for that, purchases of other goods like electronics. What is that kind of front-loading signal, though, about what kind of consumer activity we're going to see later on in the year? If they decided to make those big purchases now to get ahead of tariffs, does that mean we're going to see a big drop-off in consumer spending in short order?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great question. And it's always surprising to me how many business owners just are like, wow, this is great. We got this big bump up in sales. And this is going to be going on forever. It's not. It's actually pulling sales forward. Which is great because sales today are always better than sales in the future. But at the same time,
and this is the reason why the economy was a little bit better for China when they posted their economic data last night, because everything's being pulled forward to try to get around the whole tariff issue.
See a slowdown, right? So Trump could stand up tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm done with all this. I got what I wanted out of people. We've negotiated. Let's go back to 2024 tariffs. I'm done with the 10%. I'm done with it with Canada and Mexico. We'd still probably see a slowdown because we've had so many purchases pulled forward. I think the real challenge is we saw purchases pulled forward because people do expect prices to jump up. And then we're going to see, sort of a exaggerated or magnified slowdown that comes because people
don't bet against America. Buy into the market slowly, broad index like an S&P 500, and you will benefit greatly in 6 to 12 months. Don't be afraid.
Economy and the Fed's dual mandate specifically is something that they would have to respond to or at least think about.
So when I'm talking about the real economy, I am talking about, what do we produce? How many people are working? Are we using all of our equipment? Are we being as productive as we can? That's all real stuff. Nominal stuffs are the prices And of course, the Fed wants to make sure that we don't have the nominal stuff, the prices going up too much, because that can cause us to make different decisions in the real world, like hire fewer people because we don't know what's going on. Look, I think that companies are already at a place where they're being really cautious in terms of thinking about expansion plans, investment, hiring, because there's so much uncertainty. Operating in this highly uncertain environment means go slow. So it's a big, yellow light for people. If we see that, that we see the economy slow a lot, we see, prices jumping up a lot, consumers pulling back, we're going to see that slowdown happen even further. But
then why is Trump getting all these pledges that they're going to be building factories in chips, in autos, in part suppliers? All this investment, all this FDI is being pledged right now. It seems like supposedly this person from University of Michigan, professor of public policy and economics. You know the problem with policy and economics is it becomes more about politics than economics.
Figure out, am I offering what consumers want and am I doing it competitively against my competitors? That's where most businesses want to be. They want to be focused on that part of their business, not navigating tumultuous macroeconomic conditions.
I just want to note for our audience on Bloomberg TV and on radio and on YouTube, you can see as well that this event at the Economic Club of Chicago is just beginning. No eyes yet on Chairman Powell or the Chicago.
Tumultuous macroeconomics. Let me tell you tumultuous macroeconomics. For the last 35 fucking years, we've been shipping our manufacturing overseas, and we've lost our prowess with manufacturing and our ability to build naval ships. So that affects our hegemonic power in the Pacific. That's tumultuous, Professor.
Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee making his remarks now. We expect to hear from Powell any minute now. Betsy, before we do, just quickly on this, being well positioned to wait, how long realistically do you expect we'll be waiting until we get the Fed's next rate cut or rate decision? Because I guess we can't always rule out a hike either.
I think the issue is that these goals are in tension right now. One goal says cut, the other one says raise. And as long as they're in tension, they're going to wait because waiting's the right thing to do if they've got equal forces pushing them in opposite conditions. And so I think we could see waiting continue for quite some time until it's clear that one of those is becoming a bigger problem.
Well, I guess it's a question of when that clarity actually will emerge. Do you expect, though, Betsy, that we could see a situation in which so long the clarity has been awaited for so long that when we do ultimately get a rate cut again, it's an emergency one, that they actually have to potentially act intermeeting? Because that was the kind of narrative that was bubbling up to the surface with the volatility of the last week or so.
I think the great thing is if they need to do that, they can do that. But realize that cutting too soon risks ongoing inflation, which creates its own set of problems for employment.
So, Dr. Paul Cottrell, what would you do if the unemployment's below 5% and the inflation rate is above 2%? You don't cut. Very simple. Now, if the inflation is above 2%, let's say 2.7, and unemployment is at 6, it goes from 4.4 and goes up to 6 radically, what would you do? Wait until demand destruction, get the inflation rate below 2%, like 1.8, and then start cutting.
Please, they need to.
Well, and will they be able to continue to act with the independence that they need to, Betsy, given the rhetoric we've already heard from President Trump, who already thought weeks ago would be a good time to cut rates?
Well, I think that threatening the independence of the Fed is about the worst thing you could do for macroeconomic stability. If you think we saw chaos with tariffs, I think Trump taking over the Fed is a level of macroeconomic chaos the United States is.
What about a macroeconomic chaos when we shipped our jobs through NAFTA for the last 35 years, and now the millennials can't find work, can't find a good paying job for their first job out of college, and they have to live in the basement in mommy's home? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar of the protocol, the core protocol. It helps to boost up your energy levels and rev up your metabolism. You are going to see the benefits of, you're going to feel and see the benefits of Boomer Boost within 72 hours of taking it. All right? You get a big scooper, you take it every day. You either take it for your breakfast or for your lunch. You mix it with soft foods like hummus, yogurt, or you can mix it in a smoothie with milk or with filtered water. Take it every day. You're going to lose weight. You're going to have lots of energy. It's going to be a steady burn throughout the whole day for your energy. You're going to sleep better. And this is going to target a few of your bodily systems: your heart and your vascular system, your brain function, your musculature, and it's going to supercharge your metabolism. You're going to lose weight, and it's going to help with your A1C levels. Now, taking Boomer Boost every day is going to give you all the nutrients you need for the day, all right? Take a look at the very extensive profile that's in here. There's 68 nutrients in here. And take this once a day, breakfast or for lunch, very important. Now, you can take this also as a fuel source if you're an athlete, either your pre or post workout fuel source. So there's an added benefit with that. Now you can also take the barley, the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. You can take it with the Boomer Boost or separately. Now what's the difference? The heirloom barley helps with the detoxification of your body, soaking up free radicals with superoxide dismutase, and it's going to bring down inflammation. That's really important for your vascular system, and that's important for your immune system. It's a high density protein. You take a scooper or a half a scooper every day. Take it the same way as you take the Boomer Boost. Soft foods, filtered water, milk, smoothie. Take it for your breakfast or for your lunch. All right? Now, you can take the Gladiator barley and you get all the benefits of the heirloom barley, but this gets one added benefit, and that is that it helps to build muscle, strength. So if you're an athlete, taking this will help you gain strength. This stacks really well with Myotrol, and it stacks really well with the Boomer Boost. So you can take Boomer Boost with Gladiator barley or heirloom barley, or you can take them separately. It's up to you. And even if you're not an athlete and you're just older and you need to, get healthier, a great way to do it is to take the Gladiator barley and do some resistance training and get some muscle. All right. And again, remember what I said. Also target those back muscles. You get added benefit when you target your back muscles. You're getting stronger. You're strengthening your core, and you're improving your blood flow in your lymphatic system. Really important when you get older. So, okay, now, what do? I take the Boomer Boost and I take the Gladiator barley. All right, take them together. And what you're going to notice is that you're going to build muscle. You're going to have lots of energy. You're going to maintain a good, healthy weight. If you're overweight, you're going to lose weight. Help with a healthy weight loss, not a fast weight. If you lose weight really quickly, that's bad for you. If you have a healthy weight loss and then maintain that weight where you're at a good BMI, then you're doing it the right way. All right. And this will help you do that. All right. Now, Boomer Boost and Gladiator helps with your A1C levels. Now, you can get A1C level control also with the heirloom barley and the Boomer Boost. But you're going to control your A1C levels even more when you build muscle and you're taking the Boomer Boost and the Gladiator together. This stacks really well with Myotrol because Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle. So if you want to control lots of different organ systems and you want to get healthy, take the Boomer Boost and the Gladiator. Now, the cost of a container of barley and a container of Boomer Boost, I am sure is cheaper than how much you're paying every month for your breakfast or for your lunch, because this replaces your breakfast and your lunch. All right, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the powders, take them, get healthy. This is if you don't know where to start on going on this journey, start this way. Work out a little bit and stack and put some other stuff onto your health protocol and that holistic approach, and you're going to get healthy pretty quickly. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now, help support my work. I gave you like really, really important information, how to navigate through the financial markets, my perspective of how globalization has fucked up America, and also how to get healthy. All right. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. And if you purchase $150 or more on my store, you get a free gift until supplies last. Also, take a look at the anti-aging boxes and the longevity boxes. You can buy the products individually, or you can buy these curated boxes that I've created at a lower price point to get these very high quality products into your hands so you can get healthy. All right. Now, you got like Alex Jones out there that's saying the world's going to end like every day. All right. And then on the third day, he says that the globalists are beat back and America is going to be, the patriots are winning. And then 3 days later, he says the globalists are winning. So he's schizophrenic with his show. Now, I'm older than Alex Jones. I'm more educated than Alex Jones. I'm more fitter than Alex Jones. I'm sure Alex Jones couldn't do a triathlon. All right. So the reality of the situation is my protocol works. And it's backed by science, and it's backed by, even better yet, it's backed by experience. Experience means a lot. And when you have gone through the gauntlet through experience of how to navigate through the financial markets, how to get healthy, see where the pitfalls are with other people, and take lessons learned from that, that experience can be passed on to others. And when that experience is passed on to others, it will help the society because it can propagate quicker. Now, who do you want to pay attention to more? Who do you trust more? Someone like Alex Jones or someone like DrPaulCottrell? All right? Alex Jones didn't know anything about the crisis of 2020. Didn't understand the science of it, didn't understand any of it. He actually thought it was a non-event because he was afraid it was going to tank Donald Trump's presidency at the very beginning, which it caused a big problem. But the reality of the situation, just look at him. Do you think he sells all these supplements, but do you think that he's using them? He's aged at a faster rate the last 5 years. You take a look at me 5 years ago and now, you don't see a difference. All right? Not only that, I'm telling you what I do so you can do the same thing for your body. It works. And it's backed by science. All right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, follow my lead. You follow my lead, I will get you healthy. All right? But if you don't want to listen, it's your own damn fault. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This is the end of my transmission. Get healthy. That's the way you're going to be reducing your healthcare costs personally and at a societal level. That's the only way we're going to do it. We all have to take charge of our own lives to get healthy and to realize that most of the chronic problems in the United States when it comes to health is self-induced. That's the truth. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take charge of your life. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.